Good evening.
But these flip flops that I got are so. But I got them. Being barefoot.
I know.
So I ordered 2 more pairs, different types of shoes.
Yeah, she's like, I think
We had a shower in Avery on Saturday. And we had to come back down to 59 and I'm like, the road isn't even bad right now.
yeah, that's what she said. She's in Hooper.
Good, how are you? Do you have an air code or does it have Wi-Fi?
That's right.
Is that one of my tablet just in case?
I downloaded it. I know.
Oh, I wonder if
No, we're just right in the view of
I go and
What's happening?
classes like I don't even know what to do. Okay, so I did we need this much anymore?
I don't think so. We get it, I'm thinking, why do the search process is only less than, doesn't matter. All correct stuff and.
Oh, wait, wait, maybe I don't. I don't know, I don't ever use this, but I was looking at it for my phone. And.
It's unfortunate because they could have a lot of.
We do. I don't want anyone to trip.
I have mine.
It's a trip hazard.
We got one.
No, but you could if you wanted to, but I think, she said, look, and I downloaded it to my tablet.
Move the whole thing down to the one
Gotta
spot.
figure out where my down is, just in case there's something like that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, thank you for being careful.
Well, that's all right. I don't want to pay for your computer.
Yeah, oh, so you get Lynn Donna's running late, she got on traffic on 59 and she's at a standstill, she said, so. She's running late, John Paul's running late.
Which way is the construction? Is it coming?
I think it's, we had a game at Milford High School and we missed it, so it must be Milford Road to Hickory Ridge. Right,
It was
that
way
way.
down.
Yeah, on Saturday it was that way, I don't know if it's the same way or not. Usually the kids use it, and I'm like, I need that video.
I know, I didn't think about bringing it by yourself, really, yeah, that was my first idea.
Share between us if I can find it.
Yeah,
Well, it's kind of like I could do it, but it's not. But the one looking to take, begin to see, it's very clever. It's good dish, fried and sage. I didn't realize I missed it, work. Painting, the rest of it doesn't. So far, I can't. Already was with painting, it's just not. then the paperwork.
No, each one is numbered.
Take it over. So I've been just going.
She probably took them out.
And now,
Probably took them out.
Oh, yeah. I think probably just use this receipt, and I don't know, I don't think she'll probably show in stuff out there. So I think it'll all be just.
than what he's doing,
Right.
different health.
So, yeah. It's, yeah, I told you,
I didn't even.
I'm leaving all this stuff, so.
I probably know.
If it does something, I wanna make sure that you realize it's.
Everybody's very good.
That's right. You want that.
My wife went to Mexico twice without me. Way back when. Yes, it'll be the first time. But it was twice, and I say with 2 kids. I think she was very the first time I cleaned the house, it's not good, because she got home. I was in places she lived in Jerry, he missed me. Next time, we would really trash that place.
She wants something in the middle.
Kids are sitting here and tearing around, which was down.
So we put here these ones,
That's what I'm about after.
the second interview.
It's like even the top is
Well, we're gonna plan that meeting, because we all have our work too. I think it's just leave it at 3.
Okay.
Might be some You're dedicated.
Yeah, I'll put it up in a minute. I just thought.
That's what I thought. So if we figured we just, if we confirm
She didn't say, she called me probably 20 minutes ago and said, oh my God, I didn't realize this was what she just said. She didn't say where that's where she
Plenty of people who have done
They remind me of the same, like.
it. They went up and forth.
She wants her.
They're like last term of memory foam gentlemen.
Yeah, these are crop flip flops, not crop.
Yeah.
I don't like their crops.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the most comfortable thing I've ever walked in.
Really nice, because I tried, well, this, I did issues, so I tried to honestly, and I walked around, and there was like a bunch of, it was very jealous.
Because I have, problems with many of those really good artists. Yeah. These,
Just the ones that I was, yeah, I looked at everything else.
I was like,
Yeah.
I know.
but they have slides and they have.
I just, the ones I really wanted to like. Which was actually.
And I just ordered 2 other pairs of shoes or something.
Yeah.
So like, or something that says, it's like, on dance flip-flops.
Right.
But those are much more. He's got.
And it's not wood, it's a plastic one. I really should do better. Yeah, it's like, we didn't know, we got it, and we got one that wasn't. It's not good. Yeah, they get started to try to figure it out. It was the kind of wood, it was a cheap one. It was from my friend. It wasn't really cheap, but
I actually got mine charged. I know.
we didn't do better. It's charged now, but it's.
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah, now
email.
they try to find something, like, where? So we thought, we got like a million bucks. We're gonna not.
All right, I got it.
Fully bumper right off.
I know. I guess we didn't realize I'm allergic to Christmas trees. So like 3 months out of the year, I feel like originally like it was so bad. Christmas trees like this, and then like we're so glad it's all day. I was just like, yeah. You can actually have that.
I'll give that to you.
Oh, well, I got this.
If you go to,
It's got
from the
96%.
airport, you balls.
Sorry, guys.
Hello.
How is everybody?
How are you?
Good, thanks for waiting, sorry. It's time for a new traffic app, but it doesn't tell you that how many miles of 159 are under construction. Thank you.
M50 is not the place to be traveling at this time.
That's a lot. Already to go, is that?
We're all, well, John Paul is running, he said it is gonna be between 6:15 and 6:30, so it's up to you if you want to wait. I know you were kind of wanting everyone to be here, or,
If we can start on something,
okay,
that way, you know, we're in good shape.
all right.
So,
Let
first.
me just call the meeting to order.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you already done that.
All right, the Board of Education meeting is now called to order. If we could all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Secretary Hall. The agenda is approved as presented. Are there any changes or questions about the agenda? Okay, with that, we'll move forward. Next on the agenda, we have audience comments. If there's anyone in the audience that would wish to address the board, you may do that now. Okay, no audience comments, perfect. So with that, we will move to our superintendent search. Most of you know this is Donna Oser with the Michigan Association of School Boards. They are who we've contracted with to help us with our search for our next superintendent in Waterford. And with that, I hand it over to you, Donna.
I've had conversations with a couple of you since the last time we met, so nice to see you all face to face. So let's just kind of reconnect on a couple things. So you received access to the files Friday. Everybody was able to get in. I didn't hear from anybody that there were issues, so you're able to get in and take a look. I was tempted to put in the cover letter that the moon and stars must have been in alignment because you ended up with a much better pool than I anticipated. I know you don't see applicant pools all the time, but I do, and so I really felt like I can't quite see you. Sorry, that's right. No, I just didn't want to be ignored. So I felt like, you know, we were very fortunate in how that pool came in. So I understand that your expectations are very, very high because you were passionate about the district, and so, you know, you might not be. Look at you. Look at you.
I'm not, I don't have anyone on here that is close to what I have. So, but just,
Well,
Just me.
quite candidly, you know, that's not the comparison, right? The comparison is the selection criteria that the board agreed to, and so that's what that comparison is to. So I appreciate those comments. And last time we were together, we talked about that. But I heard a lot of good things about your current superintendent, Linda Stapleton. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so because we have another person delayed by traffic, one of the things that we can work on right now is just kind of some training around general interviews and interview preparation. And that way, you know, we'll get to kind of the more substantive things once he gets here. Does that sound okay? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and run these down both sides of the table. This is just a copy of the PowerPoint. And I'm also going to pass out the Department of Civil Rights pre-employment guide, and I'll explain why I'm sharing this with you. So, it seems like a million miles away right now, but very, very soon, you're going to be interviewing candidates for superintendent. And so, our time together tonight is going to be best spent by you if you think about it as if it were happening tomorrow. And what I mean by that is, I want you all to feel very, very prepared for being able to walk in, the evening of interviews, know what your expectation is, know what the boundaries are, of our time together that day. And I want to manage your expectations, all the way around that. So that's part of what this interview preparation is about. The ideal scenario for me is that we create an environment where we're able to compare all of those folks who we invite for first round interviews against each other. And so you'll remember that we talked about before, first round interviews, we really want to be very, very consistent. So we're going to ask the same questions of all of the folks who come to first round interviews. That can be a little frustrating sometimes. One of the reasons it's frustrating is, A, it might not be your style to stay on script, right? So that's one source of people to laugh. No, you look at me, I look at you. So that could be one issue. Another issue could be, and this happens, believe it or not, that the candidates don't answer the question, right? They get nervous, just like you do. And so sometimes they just get started down a path and they don't really answer the question. Or the third option is that they answer the question, but it doesn't quite satisfy, like you have a follow-up you'd like to ask. And so those are kind of components of this that can be frustrating to you. Understand that second round interviews, we're really able to go down those rabbit holes. So we'll have fewer candidates then, and we'll be able to ask those follow-up questions, press for clarity. At the beginning, in the first round interview, if we did that with every single interview that we did, we'd never get done. Because, right, there's 7 of you, the candidates might, kind of nuance, and each of you ask questions, and so it's very important because we want you to be able to compare them to each other. Their ability to message is certainly one of the things that you want to be evaluating them on when you're considering, who might be able to lead this district next. So while we understand that there might be some case of kind of nerves, you really do expect them to perform well during the interviews. So that's part of what this is about, this interview preparation workshop. Okay, so let's just think about it. Do you guys remember what I told you about interviews when we came together, I think 2 times ago?
In regards to,
Just in general, about search and what we think about interviews when we think about search for superintendent.
I do not recall.
Fair enough. It's the least predictive aspect of this search of the individual's success. So in other words, while there's a lot of time and energy and effort put into interviews, it's actually the least predictive indicator of all the other things. So when we look at what are the most reliable indicators of success in superintendency, it's past performance in previous positions and cognitive function. A person's ability to think and solve problems cannot be overstated. And so much of what we build into the interviews is to help us get information in those other areas. And I said that we're going to get to a point where you guys are going to have more homework to do beyond this, because certainly part of it is checking on what their past track record was. We'll hear a lot of stories during interviews, and we'll talk about why that is. And so part of what we have to do is fact check those stories and consider not just their truth and accuracy, but also do the skill sets that these individuals bring seem to be a good fit for Waterford. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at. So I talk about that now just so that you're thinking in terms of this big picture, right? The first round interview is just one small piece of a puzzle. We also have to do fact checking and reference checking. Obviously, we're going to do second interviews, and then there may be other steps that we take. You're going to get a lot of feedback from your stakeholders, and you're going to get a lot of feedback from your staff, right? You're going to be hearing a lot of information as we move through the search together. One of the frustrating things about superintendent search in Michigan is because of the Open Meetings Act, the majority of the information that we are able to find out about candidates really comes out between first and second interviews, because their names don't become public until they accept an interview. And so that's just one of those tensions. So understand that as soon as those names become public, we're gonna hear a lot of things, and then we have to start doing some digging to find out what's fact and what's fiction. I would say generally 60% of what we hear is fiction, is not true. It's more about rumor mill stuff. So it's important that as soon as anybody hears anything about candidates, whether it's you at the board table or any of you in the audience, that you let me know so that I can start fact checking that right away. And thinking about, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is that after first round interviews, once we determine who we'd like to invite back for second round, that's at the point where I'd like to give you some board assignments so that you can make some phone calls yourself. I'll give you a script, and I will intentionally challenge you in your assignments. In other words, I'm not going to give you just calls to make about the candidate you like. I'm probably going to give you some calls to make about a candidate that maybe is not as high on your list, or as I perceive as high as your list. Because remember, my job is to remove as much bias from this process as I can, so that you're making data-based, informed decisions and not emotional decisions. You'd be surprised how emotional this is going to feel for you. I know you've already felt like you were under a lot of pressure, that will increase. And so we have to mitigate that by giving you as much information as possible. So tonight, we're going to do interview questions. I will share a completely rough draft with you, and we'll work through it together. We'll tear it apart and put it back together so that by the time we're done, you feel good about it. Those questions will be assimilated into an interview guide that I will email to you ahead of time. And so for your own preparation, you'll be able to read that interview guide ahead of time. You'll know what questions you're going to ask because your name will be by it. So you'll be able to read through the whole guide. You'll be able to practice the questions that you're going to ask. It's very normal to be nervous, especially that first interview. When you first get rolling, you're going to feel very nervous. And then once we get kind of going through it, your nerves will calm down and the energy in the room will change and you'll start feeling a lot better. But I want you to know that that's normal.
About how many questions did the first round for each candidate?
Sure, yep, that's a good question. We had tentatively talked about 50-minute interviews, 5-0. Now, we're not locked into that,
Right.
So we'll talk more about it when we do the interview questions. But I'm going to say that needs to keep us to around 16 or 17 interview questions. Generally, I like to think it about 3 minutes per question. Now, that framework would mean that the candidates are not asking you questions. So if you tell me that you think it's really important in the first round that candidates be able to ask you questions, then we need to ask them fewer questions, and then we need to talk about how this board is going to handle questions from candidates. At this stage of the game, I generally don't recommend that the candidates ask questions of the board in the first round. I think there's lots of opportunity for that in the second round. But you all have different personal and professional experiences. So if you feel strongly about it, then that's something we'll talk about. What can take a lot of time is if we allow the candidates to ask a question and then all 7 board members feel like they have to answer, do the math. I mean, we could spend 20 minutes on one question from a candidate. And if that's how you want to spend your time, I'm here with you, we'll do it. But I want you to go into it with your eyes wide open when we think about that, okay? So in addition to reviewing that interview guide so that you have a sense of what's happening, you also need to be thinking about what is it that I'll be listening for in the answers that are pertinent, right? And so if that's something that you want us to do more work on with you, we can do that. We can help you mutually identify listen fors. I can provide some suggested listen fors. What I have found is that board members often have kind of your own value system in what you're listening for. And so I think it's important, and you're going to get a much better sense of this when we start working on questions today. So we can revisit that, but you at least want to have thought about, okay, for example, if we're asking a question about board relations, which we will, we need to, then what is it that I'm going to be listening for from those candidates as far as what would indicate kind of a quality answer and what would indicate an answer that I may have concerns about, okay? So those are the kinds of things you want to have organized in your head before you're sitting through the interviews and listening, okay? So just realizing that there's always a lot of noise in general, and I don't mean literal noise, I mean just a lot in the environment that affects our perceptions during an interview. First of all, it's just, I mean, I don't have it on here, but I would say energy. You know, not only is there an energy in the room around interviews, also you'll notice there's kind of a different energy with each candidate. I would encourage you to be a little charitable of your view of that in the beginning, just because people react very differently to nerves. And superintendent interviews may be one of the most kind of high nerve, high anxiety situations. I would say even more high anxiety than most of the things that they would encounter leading a school district. So that's something you want to think about. But you do want to pay attention to those folks that just have kind of a lot of charisma, but there's really no substance. I'm going to encourage you to take notes because it helps you pay attention. I'm not naturally a note taker, but when I'm doing interviews, I am a note taker because that way you can capture the facts of what they're saying, the substantive aspects of what they're saying, and you can set aside some of the noise as far as maybe they have kind of a certain effect to how they speak, maybe they use a lot of ums, ands, you know, those kinds of tendencies when they're nervous, and so your keeping notes is going to help you keep track of the substance of their answers. It's also going to give you something very valuable to refer back to when we're talking about who do we want to invite back, and maybe one of you feel strongly that, you know, we should invite back X candidate, and when you look back at your notes, you say, oh, I see your point about this, my concern was they really seem to lack depth in this other area, right? So the better notes you take is going to allow for a richer, much better informed deliberation when we talk about who to invite back for second interviews. So don't, whenever there's something that you think is, I would put in this category of noise, whether it's a nervous tick that they have or something that's going on in the audience, anything that's distracting you. My advice to you is to just write it in the column of the interview guide so that you've put it someplace and you can focus on what you need to. Because you won't get it back, right? I mean, the time that you're spending and investing in this, you need to use wisely. So you want to be able to kind of park that stuff off to the side and focus on what's really important. Keeping in mind that those interview guides are subject to FOIA. So I don't encourage you to doodle mindlessly, because I don't know what you're going to write if you doodle mindlessly, right? So you always want to be kind of pay attention to that. Welcome.
Hey there.
Can we have a copy back for, I think, for John Paul? Yeah, each of those, thank you. Hi there. We're just now starting to do kind of some things to know before you begin interviewing.
Okay.
I thought that was probably a good thing to use our time with before you were able to join us. So in this case, I'm going to ask you not to, unless we decide differently. Generally, I'm going to say no follow-up questions and don't redirect. It's not unusual for a candidate to say, let's just say you're asking the question of me and I'm a candidate. I answer it and then I say, oh, did I answer your question? And you feel the need to be polite, right? And in this case, I'm going to say to you that when a candidate asks you that question, smile and say, thank you. Because if you say, no, you didn't really, you've just gone down the rabbit hole, right? That opens up a whole new avenue. So the answer to the question is, thank you, and then we'll move on to the next question. Unless you want to build in time for follow-up questions in the first round. But that takes it to about a 75-minute interview. Okay? So thinking about your own responses when you're listening, I don't know, 1,000, I don't know how many interviews I've sat in at this point in time. Every one of you is different. Here's what my advice to you is. Whatever you do in the first interview, I want you to do it in all of them. So if you're just a nice person and you can't help but smile and be friendly, do that in every interview so that you're just consistent. Because remember, we're trying to keep the most consistent environment that we possibly can. If you're kind of a reserve, sometimes I get picked on about my thinking face looks kind of neat. You know, if you happen to do that, then I just want you to do it for every single interview. And then just, you know, try not to drop out. But generally speaking, that's what I found to be the best course of action. You looked through applicant materials, you had a lot of information, right? A lot of information. More homework than you had, probably more time. So you probably already have some ideas, some perceptions or opinions that just naturally, we're all human, have begun to form. And this is my opportunity to remind you that as we're going into interviews, don't pick a horse. Don't pick a winner. It's way too soon to fall in love, right? So you want to have as open a mind as possible and be very cognizant of telling yourself that. Like if you feel yourself starting to kind of pull for one person or another, check that as your own bias and reopen your mind. Because, you know, we talked about this before, about how we committed to a process and we're going to follow that process, and so much changes in the course of time. So for those of you who were involved in previous search here, was there a big difference for you between first and second round interviews? Did you see a lot change there? Some yes, and some
It
no.
depends on which process you're referencing.
Yeah. Usually,
Which one of the 5?
well, okay, let's just talk about the most recent one. I see, you know, certainly in the last 7 years, I see that a lot can change in that space of time. Remember, the greatest discovery of information happens in that window, but also people perform very differently in a second round situation than they do in the first round. And of course, what we hear through indirect references and direct references, right, is also going to inform your decision making. So just try to be objective. You don't need to rush from one interview question to another. So for example, if it's your turn to ask an interview question and John Paul has just finished and everybody is still writing, you can look around and see that everybody is still writing. Give it a minute or two, and it looks like they've pretty well captured their notes, then go ahead and ask the next question. Candidates understand that you're pacing for the group for their ability to take notes. Your audience is probably going to be taking notes as well. So that's very normal. Don't feel like it's your turn and you have to rush to the next question right away. So eye contact is important. I mentioned to you that my practice is different than Marlene, so I will not be asking the interview questions. I will assign interview questions to all of you. We will start with the board president. The board president will, of course, call the meeting to order, welcome each candidate as they come in, ask the first kind of context-setting question that we'll talk about, and then we'll proceed in order after that. And so I'll need to know, and I don't need to know from you, but before we prepare the interview, guys, I want to know the order that the board is going to be sitting in, because I don't like it to be like popcorn for the candidates, you know. I like to know the order that you're going to be in, and that's the order that we will be questions in. I already talked to you about really thinking about facts, actual events. We can fact check all of that. So if you're asking somebody a question and it's about something like, I don't know, curriculum or quality instruction, and they're giving an example of their leadership in that particular area, that's why we're taking notes, right? So that we can actually talk to folks in that example that they're giving us and say, you know, what was so-and-so's role in this? How would you describe their effectiveness? What would you say were the outcomes? You know, things like that. So that's why another reason why those notes are important. And it's not a bad idea before you shift gears to actually write down the questions you have. So if they didn't quite fully answer a question and you wanted to know more, or maybe they answered a question really well and you're like, I want to hear more about that particular program or initiative that they mentioned, you'd want to make a note of that as well. Because we can talk about how we would work that into second round if that individual was invited back for a second round. All right, so let me check in with you now and just say, how are we doing? Anybody have any questions thus far?
I have 3. The candidates are completely confidential until after the first interview.
Nope. They're confidential until they accept the invitation, to interview. And so what that means is that tonight we're going to identify candidates that you would like to have an interview with. I will give them a call tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on how late we're here tonight and whether or not they answer the phones. I give them usually until noon to let me know for sure. Once they accept the interview, I'm going to compile that schedule of interviews. I'm going to redact the personal information on their resumes. I'm going to write a press release, and the whole public at that point will know who has accepted an interview in Waterford and have, you know, access to the information that I just described.
So when you said the most information in this process comes out between the first and the second interview, you meant as a result of fact checking and further inquiry based on information that we get from the first interview.
And what will surface immediately as soon as the news become public.
So even before the first interviews, that's what I was kind of thinking. Once it's public,
Yep.
all of a sudden you hear this. That's why I was wondering why.
Yeah,
it's
that's a
the
good clarification. I thank you for that. Is, yeah, certainly a lot starts to percolate right then. So maybe I should change my wording and say from the time the names are announced until the board decides who to move to second interviews. Maybe that's a better statement to describe. Thank you.
No, thank you. And then, we as a group, I think collectively decided that we will be moving forward only 2 final candidates. And is there room for a change in that number in your mind, or are we really committed to 2?
I'm going to tell you what my standard, yeah, well, because my standard advice is this, whether we're talking about today or we're talking about who to move forward into second round interviews, I'm always, if you can't come to terms, I'm going to ask you to take the higher number.
Okay.
And the reason why is that the more doors we leave open, all that costs us is the time that we have to invest in the interview, the further vetting, as opposed to trying to step back in the process, which is not an easy thing to do.
Perfect. I agree. Then my last question is, do candidates have the questions ahead of time, at least the full listing that MASB typically would then assign? And are they like STAR T, like situation, task, action, result, transference type questions? Or is it more, I mean, is it tell me about a time when you did X, Y, Z, or is it?
Senior things, is it like Jeopardy or is it real life?
Yeah, that's good questions. You've done this before, I suspect. So just kidding. So first of all, whether or not the questions will be public will be up to you all tonight. And so let me explain why. So we'll determine the questions, but some boards decide they don't want to deal with the monkey business of so-and-so knew the questions. You know, like if you're on the second night and you send somebody the first night, so there's always this weird distortion where board members can be like, well, yeah, they had a much better interview, but I feel like they knew the questions. Sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. It's important to not assume intention, or good or bad. So some boards will just decide in that environment, like, you know what, we're going to make all of the questions public, so all the candidates have them ahead of time, and then we will know that it's a level playing field. Some people, when I explain that, think that's the craziest thing I've ever said. And so I just present it as something that you need to make a decision on. And whatever we do, we just want to be consistent in how we do it and as fair as possible. So things to think about. Your other question was about the kinds of questions that we're going to ask. So I recommend almost always that we ask behavioral experience-based questions because that does afford us those facts to check, those examples to check. So yes, the STAR framework is something that you'll see on the interview guide, situation, task, action, resolve, yes. And we also explain that to candidates so that they understand that they should be very specific in answering the questions. That said, it doesn't mean every question needs to be that way. Sometimes I think there's real value to just a straight up, I won't say a philosophy question, but like approach. What's your approach to this? Kind of thing. It mixes up the format, and I don't want to say you catch them off guard, but you catch them maybe in a more natural state when that happens, and so that can be a very useful tool. You'll see 1 or 2 of those in the suggested ones that I'm bringing forward tonight. I don't have any ownership. In other words, I try to do a good job of giving you a draft, but I really want you to feel 100% confidence in the questions that you're going to ask. So we'll do what we need to do to get those right for you. Any other questions? Not yet. Okay. So I already mentioned what the intent was in the first round. Now, we're not going to have a ton of time like we do, not that we have a ton of time, but we have more time tonight to talk about things than we're really going to have the next couple times we get together. So I'd like to set the context, and I'm going to send you an email and remind you of these things. But remember that second round interview is very different. It will intentionally feel less formal and less structured than the first round. We will need to talk about what kinds of opportunities. I had worked with Megan before she went on leave, and she had put a draft schedule together, just generic of candidates. So we expect on that the day of final interviews, second round interviews is what I call them, because I don't assume it's a final. Those folks are going to come to the district. They're going to have a tour of the district. I like to see us do an open house format so the public can interact and get perspective. For you all thinking about what that format looks like though, I will generally, based on who your finalists are, provide you, let's just say 4 questions, both on the strength side and on the challenge side for each of your finalists. Okay, because I will have given you kind of a generic, it's not generic, it's specific to each candidate that says, here's what we might think their strengths are, here's what we think some potential challenges may be for them, here's some starter questions. I'm gonna ask each of you to do 3 questions for each candidate. We won't exchange those ahead of time. Because the second interview flows like a conversation, we don't have to exchange them ahead of time. Because if you have a question in your notes to ask and you ask it and it's similar to yours, you will have heard him ask the question and you may choose to ask a follow-up question or you'll just mark it off your list. So those interviews, because they're much more conversational, that flows just fine. Now, that can seem harder than it is, so I want you to process what I just said and then let's talk about it if you have concerns. Let me repeat it back. Okay, go ahead.
The concern would probably be if we're not passing the ball appropriately to one another and then it's not flowing. Like if one person's dominating the conversation, for example, or one person's not adding any input or feeling empowered to ask questions, that would be my concern about that approach without structure. So is there some structure to make sure that everybody's questions are heard?
That's a very good question. So my expectation and my guidance in that situation is that the board president chair the meeting, right? And so, as always, the board president needs to be mindful of making sure all voices at the table are heard, that doesn't kind of go off the rails. And I will tell you that while I have worked with a terrific diversity of boards, I have not found that to be an issue. Generally speaking, people on the best behavior during interviews, all the way around. It does require the president to really be on their toes, though. There's no doubt about that.
Great. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
it's that leadership thing, all right? So we'll have some time, but I'd like you to think about now, usually the fact that you're going to get this document from me that says, here are the strengths as I see them of this candidate and the challenges, and they're different, obviously, for each candidate moving forward. And you have some starter questions for me, generally speaking, that is enough to make you like, okay, I haven't had anybody that felt like it didn't work. They're usually very satisfied with us. So, but we can revisit it when we're closer to that. I just like to share it with you now so you can start thinking about it. Because like I said, our schedule changes after this. And for the board president, know that I still would provide you an abbreviated script so that you have a sense of opening, closing, transitions, things like that, okay? I expected one more slide, but I guess it's not there, so don't worry about it. So I also handed out to you the Department of Civil Rights, their kind of pre-hiring, the questions that are legal and not legal. Usually, you have it in your hand, it's in your left hand. If you turn it over to the back, you'll see it. That's okay. So that's a nice little chart on the back. Obviously, there are protected classes. So, we never ask about anything like religion or affiliation. That's inappropriate. We don't ask about age. We don't ask about marital status. We don't ask about whether or not they have children. Usually, when I hear anecdotally of a board slipping, it's so innocent. I don't think I've ever heard of a story of a board intentionally asking an illegal question, during an interview. But that's why I provide this to you, so that you know better than that. Because even that which could seem really, just just innocent, like, oh, what church you're Lutheran, oh, we've got a great Lutheran church down the road. I was like, no, we would not do that. That would not be something that we would do. I think the most common one I hear about is the do you have kids? And will you be sending them here, right? I think that's probably, you know, the one I hear about most often. So, you know, keeping in mind, now, remember in the first round, can we all agree that we're gonna stick to the script in the first round and we're not gonna ask follow-up questions?
Yes.
Absolutely. think
I
that-
agree with that.
Great, okay. So we know that this probably won't come up, right, in the first round. So where it may come up is in the second round, when we're asking, you know, we're having a conversation and we're asking follow-up questions. And so I know that you have these fantastic binders. So I would just add this maybe to the front of your binder so that you can revisit it and have it in front of you when we're doing second interviews. Like I said, most of it is pretty straightforward. It's usually like the community approach that actually gets you sideways, right? Whether it's a kid thing or a church thing or something like that, and it's just completely unintentional, but it happens. Okay. All right. So talk me through, I really want this to be as real as possible for you. So I think we decided that we're doing interviews in the same room, what is it called, the LGA? LGI,
Yeah.
okay.
At
So
Kettering.
we're gonna do it in that LGI room, and at Kettering, right? And, you know, you have kind of that raised, a little bit of a raised platform there. And so my ask is gonna be that the board be kind of angled on one side and the candidate be angled on the other, because I want the audience to be able to see all of your faces and the candidates' faces. And you all can see each other, meaning you can see the candidate can see you. So that is what Megan and I had talked about. That generally works best when the audience can't see the board or can't see the candidate. It just makes the audience crazy. So we don't need to do that. It's better that we set it up this way. Imagine that you're walking in that first night. What are you thinking? What are you worried about?
Crazy people showing up.
Other than us?
Yeah, people on our list, like, because that was one of my questions, I guess I should ask. After we pick the people to interview, we're gonna be doing background check and stuff after we interview them instead of before, because it would save some time if there was some type of check done on them after we name this person or someone we want to interview, and we come to find out they may not be who they pretended they were.
This is a very good question. So because we can start digging deeper as soon as they accept an interview, I will tell you.
You will be doing that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Here's what, but if you hear something, you have to let me know, because
Yes.
I'm not here,
Yes.
I'm not gonna hear the
Right.
same things that
Yep.
you're gonna hear. And so, when that happens though, what I will ask that individual to do is to address it in an open meeting. So I will have done the fact checking, blah, 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 I will do that. It may be that I send you an email with an update, it may be that I speak to it publicly in a meeting, it depends on the situation. But I will always ask the candidate to deal with it in their own statement. And I'll tell you why, because otherwise nobody's gonna listen to anything they say,
Yep.
right? And sometimes something can be true, but not disqualify them as a viable candidate. And so they need to be able to speak to
To
that as
address
well.
too.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I'm kind of
Yeah.
looking for, that
So the,
we don't waste either of each other's time
right.
before we interview, so. okay.
I try to be as efficient, and I will say sometimes I have said to candidates like, hey, you know, here's the issue, you really need to address it in your open statement. And sometimes they'll say, okay, I'm gonna withdraw, and it's like, okay, you know, that's your option.
That's-
It's not because I don't care about the candidates, I actually do, but the public's not gonna move past it anyway. So it's like, this is just how it has to go, and really it works well. Good question. Any other questions when you think about yourself walking in that room, sitting at the table?
Yeah, go ahead.
The flow, so in the past, I know you said Marlene asked the questions, I can't remember.
No,
that.
we asked it.
That's
Oh,
what I
did you?
thought.
We-
Usually she asks the questions.
Yeah, no, we
Oh,
did.
good,
Yeah.
you're used to
We
that.
just went around, same one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But you would kind of kick things off. I mean, I want everyone to feel comfortable, and, I mean, we all do. You know, you want the environment to be one of welcome and comfort. Is that something you do? Does the board president do that? Is that all decided?
It's usually, it is decided ahead of time, and usually it's a kind of a bridge of both. So we'll make sure that there's a kind of a green room for them when they arrive. So whoever from your district welcomes them and stays with them when they're in there, they will certainly, you know, have a role in that. And then I generally will walk the candidates in, introduce them, and then the board president takes over at that point in time.
Who would be the person, is that normally like a Megan, right? So that might be.
I could do that. I could ask what church they go to, how many kids they have, all there,
That's right, how old they
how tall
are.
they are.
What's their health like?
Do you have a
Nope.
vehicle?
That's
She knows
not-
that either.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have a
since
vehicle? That's a question that we can't ask. I don't think so.
transportation becomes an issue, you can ask about transportation, you can ask about what kind,
Okay.
generally, because it
Not
has
explicit.
other implications. Yeah, it's not explicit.
Okay.
I didn't think you were gonna ask it anyway, it doesn't usually come up with superintendent interviews, in Michigan.
Okay, can be right.
Um,
Have a G in town, so.
Okay, so thinking about your, so it might be, it might not be, and let me just say why. Some districts that I'm in, you know, the executive assistant that works with the board and superintendent wants to sit on interviews. And so I work with the district to say, okay, well, if that's the case, is there somebody else that you could bring in who would do that so that you could actually be in the room? And so it's a little different. In this case, I don't expect that she will be back by then.
Right, she won't, that's why I was
Right,
wondering,
yeah,
like,
she won't be back by then, and so I'll coordinate with my contact and
We'll
see.
have Keith do it.
Maybe not, maybe that's not the best plan. Good suggestion.
You don't like any of my ideas.
Well, I like to think about us putting our best foot forward too. And so, you know,
exactly, like, that's what I'm thinking, like, can we get you a glass of water, I mean, a water is, you know, just making sure that they have a comfortable environment prior to coming out for the actual interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
so I'll work that out. Everybody I have worked with, your central office has been fantastic. And so we'll make sure that's well on your desk. Okay, so we're gonna revisit an issue when we're done with interview questions, and it's this. Am I shutting it down at the time? You know, so if we get close to the time of 50 minutes, am I the one
Yes.
who's intervening at that point, or is the board president? Because whatever we do the first time, we need to do each time, right?
I would think, my opinion would be, it would be you, just
Okay.
because I think us and board members are gonna be more into the questions. That's my opinion, not really worrying about the time, so I would rather have that be you
Yeah.
to, you know, be that person.
I
Is
think
50 minutes magical?
I'm looking 45, sounds like a nice number, a smaller number.
We're gonna do interview questions before we lock in on that, because a smaller number always sounds better until everybody has their question.
Right,
And it's like,
exactly,
oh,
that's what I'm
right.
wondering, if from your experience, does that seem like, I'm worried the opposite, Rob, I'm worried that's not enough
1 hour.
time for us
I
to
know, I
get
was
enough
wondering 50 minutes,
to get a sense, because we'll be likely
We
eliminating
have, but we
several
have,
candidates
yeah.
based on.
But after a half an hour of hearing something, you can usually get a pretty good feel whether or not, and you're right, we're hearing them for half an hour, 45 minutes, 50 minutes. We get a feel for it, and again, if there's something we kind of like, or they're coming back, because we're not limited.
if we all agree that.
Right,
Right.
but I mean, it's common
Everybody's
sense.
different, so one person might expand a lot more than another person. So it's just, I think it's really hard to judge until you're in there, because somebody might have
I think the same thing. I think a 45-minute, 50-minute is a good span of time. I think when you start getting to an hour, then it could get long and fatigued, and they could be speaking a lot. People are gonna be succinct with their answers.
Yeah.
They're gonna
And the
be-
last person, I'm not gonna like,
Yeah.
because it's gonna be at the end of the night.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be fatigued for them either. I know that was an issue that we had last time.
Oh, it's only 1 year night.
Yeah,
We're gonna do
during the
5
last
minutes in a row.
meeting.
Okay, 1 second, John Paul has the floor.
Sorry, the last time we actually did this, I remember that was one of the issues we talked about, was how many candidates at a time. Because we wanted to make sure that we weren't fatigued, that we're
Yep.
sitting there
Yeah.
for 2-3 hours. So if we're doing like a 45-minute span, they may allow us for, three people at a time. If we have 3 or if we have 4, whatever it is. But I think we don't want to be fatigued, because it's not fair to the candidates if they're the last one up and we're all fatigued and tired. And so and I think that would be good. And then as far as when we're talking about who would put the time on it, I would think it would be the board president, but I guess you guys can figure that out. But
So a nice bridge for that I have seen is just because I have a sense of, I'm tracking their answers. So a nice bridge for that is, if I see that they're running close on time, I can get up, walk over to you, hand you a Post-it note that says
Yeah.
move to last question.
Okay.
Because we're never just gonna say thank you, you always wanna give them the chance to make their closing statement.
Right.
And so that is a nice hybrid of that
Yeah.
works
I
well.
like that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what we'll do.
Yep.
Okay, so, check in with yourselves for a second. Any other questions when you think about interviews? More may come up for you, don't feel badly about that. You can always shoot me a text or give me a call or shoot me an email. You know, I want you to feel good walking in. There's a lot of nerves, a lot of energy. You're gonna get a lot of questions from the public once the names are out there. So just know that's all normal when you expect that, okay? Best thing you can do if somebody comes to you and says, I heard so-and-so this, I heard so-and-so that, say, hey, you know, either you can email me and let me know, the search consultant, or you could direct them to me. I've had a lot of contact with a lot of you folks here along the way, and so, you know, either way, what I want to do is get that information so that I can vet it. Okay, so your choice now. Interview questions, candidates. What would you like to do next? Gotta do them both tonight.
Candidates.
That's it. Candidates.
Candidates, okay.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, so I want to take you back to a point in time when I sent you the information, and I asked you to come today with your top 5 in mind. That does not mean we're only interviewing 5. It's just a place for me to start from a polling perspective, okay? To remind you and to remind all of those good souls that are in the room from the community and the staff that we are not talking about any names or any districts today. We are strictly referring to candidates by their candidate number that was assigned to them. So I am going to pass down some Post-it notes. I'd like you each to take one and just jot down your 5 for me, and then we'll go and kind of see how things are going. This is
Write
not
down
a-
their number, right?
Yep, just write down their number for me. This is not a, I'm gonna destroy these afterward. We're gonna do this in public, so this is not a ballot. It's just so that you will organize your thoughts.
Did you see the basketball player during the playoff game who was on the bench looking at his phone? Just
No.
don't, because I have the PDF, it's on my phone, so if anybody sees me looking at it, I'm not texting, I'm looking at superintendent stuff, so.
That's good to know.
Yeah, there you go.
Smart.
Sure.
It's like, what, are you looking at that
Same
picture
thing with the
again?
laptop.
Right.
Yeah.
So you want these back?
You can hang on to them.
Okay, all right.
So look for your name up here when you're done. And I'm gonna move right through this. I just pull right, this is the order I'm gonna pull you in. So you're on that.
Oh, I'm ready.
But you don't have to go yet. I want them to finish their
Okay,
notes first.
sure.
You know that always happens, is somebody's like, what?
And I have a couple that I could go either way, so,
Yep.
but I have my 5.
What'd you say, Heather? You say 6?
Remember
I have
five is,
3. I'll work on the other 2 after, because I didn't write down enough stuff on it. I'm
okay.
hoping to have a big
Yeah,
thing I could.
Oh, you want
How
to?
many you have?
I need-
I do it all
I actually
electronic.
have 8 that I did,
Did
but I
anybody
have my
print them?
5. Print.
The materials?
No.
Just in case he needed to take a peek.
I did.
I can show you on my phone if you want.
It's pulled up here, I had it a minute ago. Yeah,
If
no
you
way.
need me to pull it up on my
I
phone.
got it. I don't know when it's happening.
So as I said, this doesn't mean we'll stick to 5, it's just where we're starting. So I like to get 5 from each of you, because otherwise it creates an imbalance.
Just 5, so.
Your top 5. I think I should like, put that in like neon in the memo or something. You're gonna be fine.
All right.
Would it be helpful if we all go sit on that side so we can see the board?
If it's more comfortable for you, but you could just turn your chair. I mean,
I feel like I'm blocking. I feel like maybe if we're all sitting together, it might be.
Yeah, I'm good.
Bob and I had the chance to talk a couple times, and, you know, I had so many conversations with people about this vacancy, and, I was very clear that they needed to do their research before they applied. They needed to have a very real understanding of what was going on, you know, in the district, and also the complexity, you know, with the board as well. I think some of them chose to call your current superintendent, you know, all of them did, because that's not, you know, they don't view that as something that's appropriate all the time. But so, as I was saying, I just really was pleased with, this, not that every one of these folks is a rock star, that's not the point. I'm giving you the look. But you certainly do have a couple rock stars in your pool, more than a few. And I was very pleased about that. And I don't say that.
And a couple that
I
are
don't
like,
say that.
that are out there.
Oh, they're always, listen, we can't prevent anybody from applying.
Did you see that?
So, sure.
Except the rest of
So
them.
hate to interrupt, but that camera is angled right to John Paul's computer a little bit.
Oh.
And I don't know if there's confidential stuff on his computer.
No,
That
not
is
yet.
so helpful.
It's not on there yet, but
Okay,
thank you.
but I didn't want you to
John, you
not
might be
realize
better
it was.
Yeah,
over
I
there.
think over there.
Over the camera.
I didn't want to inadvertently have something show up on a feed that should not be on the feed.
Thank you.
It's a wide
Do you want me to
shot.
grab a chair?
I mean,
Or is it?
There's a Zoom, right?
yeah, but there's no one running it, so
I just,
Put it at the ceiling, you can still hear things.
yeah.
I don't want to touch
Let's get the
it.
crowd. Everybody smile.
I just would hate to have any of you
Happy
get.
people.
Do you want,
It was just wide.
are you going right there?
Yeah, take
Move that keyboard.
Sorry to interrupt, we just didn't want.
No, that was perfect, thank you.
Thanks for here.
Yeah. Wait, just waiting for the staple.
I know, right?
I have a question that I wonder if I can ask, and it's probably more for the board than it is for you, but I don't know if anybody else was feeling like this, but when I was reviewing all of this information, my overriding pervasive emotion was that I don't want to exclude somebody who's a rock star, and you can't always tell from a resume and what you're looking at a piece of paper. So my thought was that if after we go through this whole process, if you have knowledge, and I know I'm not asking you to pick our superintendent by any means, but if we are eliminating someone in this conversation that you think might be a good fit based on what you know and what you've seen in your role, I think it's worth the hour interview for us to have that opportunity. A 50-minute
50
interview.
minutes.
50, Rob, 50. Does that make sense? I know this is our process,
No, we know.
but
You're the professional. Guide
but if
us.
you know, you've spoken with the people, you know that you're in this world, we're not necessarily in this world. So if we're talking about somebody and we get done with this whole thing and you're like, man, I'm feeling really bad about this, if your gut is telling you you feel really bad about this, I guess I would just ask if the board is open to you sharing that information with us.
I think Marlene did that same thing.
Yeah.
There was a few that she's like, I think you guys should at least consider
Yeah.
this
Review it.
person, rethink about it, take a look at it, and which, again, she had a lot of knowledge and had been into it a lot, so
Yeah.
we took that, so, yeah.
Okay.
You don't feel comfortable with that, do you?
No, I do. I mean, obviously, you know, when I did the paper screening based on your selection criteria, at that point in time, I also take into consideration everything that is currently known to me about those applicants. So I'll be honest, when I did that, those folks that most closely match those what we commonly call as the top tier, there were other people I could have put in there. I intentionally kept it to as limited a pool as possible because I didn't want to create confusion at the board table.
Okay.
So I tried to be, and if there was a no, you know, something that I knew to be an issue from another search I've done that was, you know, I've already checked, I already know, then I didn't even put them in the top tier. Because I don't want to create, I felt like you guys didn't need any more confusion. Now that said, Well, it's a
You're
tough
looking at me
process.
again.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
But that's why I also said in my memo to you, you can interview any of these applicants. This is not, you know, this, that is.
There are a couple I really would like to meet.
I didn't say you could meet them, I said you could interview them. But the point is, oh, you.
Sorry, my pen,
Okay,
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes.
so you're in good shape. It looks like, okay, so we're almost there. Just give me a second.
I just made sure you were.
Oh, I know, I thought, what was just by my foot? Was that bad? Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to meet these people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we've had a few,
It's exciting, like, wow. I didn't feel good over the weekend, and I'm looking at some of these thinking,
not, you feel better
wow,
now?
yeah.
Funny fresh. Okay, here's what we're gonna do, if everybody's okay with it. It looks like John Paul is just doing some last minute verification. So if you guys are amenable to it, I'll start with Bob and work my way through, and we'll come back to you, John Paul. Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. You're okay with that? Everybody's
fine.
good with
Sure.
that? Okay, so what I'm asking you to do is just read me the numbers that you identified on your blue post-it note, please.
All right, 52?
Not necessarily in order.
Yeah,
No, this is not a
no
ranking,
order.
right. I like them in numerical order, but that's just because it's easier for me.
Okay.
Okay,
621, 1794, 1951, 1970. I did that in numerical order. for
that
you.
was very nice.
Yeah.
So will you just take a look and make sure that I have reflected all of yours accurately?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, ready?
Ready, mine are in order now, I gotta do this in my head. Okay, so 52. 621,
Thank you,
821,
thank you,
1020,
thank you.
1970.
Did you say 1970? Perfect. So I'm gonna repeat back to you. 52, 621, 821, 1020, and 1970.
Bingo.
Right? You're so naughty. Okay, ready?
Okay, 56, 204, 621, 1951. Sorry, go back up, 1794.
Okay. Let me repeat those back to you. 56, 204, 621, 1794, and 1951.
Yes.
Great.
621,
Thank you.
1020,
Thank you.
Oh,
Oh,
you-
wrong one. Wait a minute. Okay.
1794,
1794.
1816, 1951.
Okay, let me repeat them back. 621, 1020, 1794, 1816, and 1951.
Yes.
Right?
52,
Thank you.
204,
Thank you.
821,
Thank you.
1794,
Thank you.
1970.
Right? 52, 204, 821, 1794, and 1970.
So for my battleship.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, 52,
Thank you.
204, 621,
Thank you.
1794,
Thank you.
1970.
Thank you. when you're ready.
1020. 17.
Yeah, I lost you, you're over here. No. 1020.
Yeah, 1020, 1794, 621, 1970, and 174.
174, 621, 1020, 1794, and 1970.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So check my totals. Am I seeing any mistakes?
Are there supposed to be? I mean, is this a test?
No.
Find the error?
But I know, I was good.
Yeah.
So I just, it's like a dumb track, it's good. Okay, so right out of the gate, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward that these two candidates that have the 6 in the soft poll. So now I want you to check your list. So this is candidate 621 and candidate 1794. So it would make sense, you know, they show a lot of support at this point, that we kind of jot those two numbers down as folks we likely would like to invite to interview. Is anybody opposed to that? So this isn't a formal vote, I'm just checking in. Okay, very good. So now I'm going to go to the next highest kind of interest getter, this candidate 1970. So check your list and check in on who 1970 is. Okay? Everybody okay with us inviting, tentatively, we're going to do a final piece on this, candidate 1970 for interview? Okay, very good. So now we're going to take a look at kind of the next one, which is 4, and then we're going to pause and have a conversation. So take a look at the candidate 52. I'm sure everybody's kind of familiar with that individual. And I'm suggesting that candidate 52 would be another one that there's enough interest that would warrant an interview. So we're gonna let that breathe. So what we have just talked about is that candidate 52, candidate 621, candidate 1794, and candidate 1970 would occupy 4 interview slots potentially. Now, I only asked you to do 5 votes because I like to leave some space open for us to talk to each other about, you know, what's important. When we look at kind of the remaining vote getters, 204, 1020, and 1951, those folks all received 3. Now, if you're sitting in the audience and you're like, why would they interview somebody that only gets 3 or 4 votes? Understanding that, remember how some of the board members said, oh, but I had more on my list. A lot of times you're like, it was like 1 away.
Right.
And so this is where there's that opportunity to really think about, you also don't want to just interview all that take the same type. You know, like it's nice to have some diversity of background and experience so you can compare when you're interviewing. So take a look at these. I'm going to read the numbers back to you. 204, 1020, and 1951. So, what are you thinking about when you think about those kind of three? There's some differences in that mix. Is your first blush response, maybe it's worth exploring all three of those? Is it, let's talk about a couple of them?
Personally, for me, all three of them were also a part of my top 7 or 8, whatever I had. I gave you my top 5, but those out of there, 10, 20, and 204, which were not in my top 5, would have been in my top 8. So, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to any of those 3.
I think they got 3. You hate to hold back a couple hours of our time to miss somebody that 3 people are interested in for whatever reason they picked up on their things. If they have 3s, we have to have a cutoff line, and I really like that personally.
So,
I was just gonna say, if we pick those 3 also and put in, that gives us 7,
it does,
doesn't it?
yes.
Yeah, which, I don't know, you wanna go 6?
Remember, I told you
7?
I'm gonna suggest
Right.
more than less every time.
Right.
Because.
I agree with Rob, like he said, if there's,
Like you said,
What have you done
more.
to lose?
you have nothing to
I'd rather
lose.
have it all in there, why not? We
Why
don't
not?
know, it's so hard to
Yeah.
read these, everyone, all these people have done,
Right.
amazing things on paper. even-
Most.
Well, yeah, that's true,
Thank you.
but, the 5 that at least the 5 that we've picked, they've all done, every 5 that everyone picked has done amazing things, so let's look at them.
I agree.
It's a huge
I
decision, let's
Yep.
get more information.
Yep. If you take one out, you might be losing that rock star.
So what do you think about that then? Is there sort of general support? You want me to put arrows behind them so you can see, just make sure you know who we're talking about here?
I have concerns about one of those,
Which one? Just say the number.
10, 20.
Agreed, but
And it has to do with the trajectory and then the lack of trajectory. So they were a superintendent of a large district, and then they left that position, and now they're a superintendent of a very small district. So I'm not sure what happened there, and that was my red flag.
Yep, actually it's a little different than that. And we try to summarize it on here because we want you to know when they have been a superintendent previously. So this is somebody who, yes, is a superintendent of a district, went to be an assistant superintendent of a very large district.
Right.
Very large district. And then realized, gosh, this might not be for me.
Okay.
So is an assistant superintendent in a more moderately sized district until finding another superintendent.
I see.
So that, and
I feel better, because I looked at that and I'm like, what
But
happened
it's-
here?
It's a
That-
3-minute interview,
Yeah,
45 minutes. Back to 50.
he's
You
very
say it
charitable
enough
now.
times.
I mean, he really.
Why don't we just take everybody, just interview them all, right?
Funny.
There are a couple people I do want to talk to, I want to meet. And again, I didn't
If only
get,
there was like kind of speed in it.
Yes.
Speed dating.
Right, okay, so if that is, if those 7 are our slate, is that something that you can all get behind? And all that says is we want more information about these people, really, it's not even a date, it's like a cup of coffee. We're good?
I'm completely fine with that.
I mean, the 1s and 2s were not,
Unless one of you make a case for that now.
I'm just trying to, I had one of them, I'm trying to think what it was. What it was.
821, is that what you're thinking about?
Then again, I didn't do my
That's the one I
things in
put down,
numbers.
too.
Is it okay? Just because it was kind of a little more, I don't want to say out there per se, but a little more outside the box, is the reason I asked.
Yeah, and a good track record from every, I mean, I have not had this person in a search before, but everything I could do pre-wise indicates a pretty good track record of this please apply.
And again, if I did that 1-2, that evens up our number.
Well,
Well,
and
it's
We
only
got
two.
7, right, oh, you're saying if,
the reason that I discounted that one,
Okay.
I'm just gonna throw it out there
Yes.
because you might
That's what
have
we're
the same
looking
type of, was that they were a sitting superintendent and they are no longer a sitting superintendent, as if maybe they retired or,
So this is so to give you, I get this is not a place you're probably familiar with. So this is a person who was a successful sitting superintendent who was recruited to work for their ISD.
oh.
So that's what that is. They were a local who went to work for the ISD. So
We don't
that's
have
what that is.
superintendents, I think, around here that go to our ISD. I'm not aware of. That's interesting, okay. But they're not a superintendent now,
Per se.
No,
they're-
no,
right?
no, what they're doing is providing support to the
To other.
to the local superintendents, right? And
And
I don't say that to persuade you, I'm just saying
No.
that's what that trajectory is.
And again, I seen that as being in the, we want to come back into a school atmosphere is what I
liked the emphasis on the focus of what they were doing, that's the part that I liked.
like. Again, I have no idea why, but it was on my list, so.
that's what, 821?
I liked the.
I would be very comfortable
With
knowing
adding.
that, adding that person, because I was very impressed with the data and the results. I was just a little concerned.
What it takes.
We're up to
8.
8.
4 and 4.
Are we gonna do 4 in one night?
We did 8 last time, just so you
Did
know,
we?
that was what we did for, yeah.
Did we do 4?
So we would do 4 and 4.
45 minutes.
Did we do that?
As I recall, it's, correct me if I'm wrong.
If it didn't happen this morning, I don't remember.
We did, for final, we didn't. but
It's
for
about
the
now
original-
anyway.
Did we?
Yeah.
Right, no,
Yeah.
His fingers.
I just, if we're getting into 4 in one night, I'm fearful of kind of what Rob said, that 4th one after being there 4 hours.
Do you know that candidates think the last interview of the night is the best interview?
Best?
Yeah.
That's what
And so you
candidates
might
think.
remember them
You
the
should
most,
go away
right?
thinking about them.
It's so funny. I have not found that to be true, by the way, but they all tell me that's what it is. I'm like, oh, you must know. It's kind of a joke.
Do we do a blind draw or do we?
No, I handle that.
Last one on there? Yeah, I think we.
You could do 3 nights. I mean,
I
if
think we did last, that's what they were
If
thinking.
we
I
can
thought
find
we
the
did
extra
too.
date, I mean, we can add our own challenges of dates here, but
Right.
if we can find the extra date, we could do that. First, let me hear what you want. Do you want to see the 8?
It was a different type of candidate. It gives me a different view, a different, where they're coming from.
Yeah, you've
And
got a
I
nice
like
mix.
that, and I like that type of change up.
That's,
There are some numbers that I would absolutely say, no way. But I think the 821 would be somebody that I wouldn't have a problem, you know.
I had them on my list, they just didn't make the top 5.
yeah, that's how they go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, look at me. Everybody okay?
Yep.
Because the next thing I'm gonna suggest, if you give me the, yeah, I can live with that, Donna, is a motion to, you would entertain a motion, to invite these candidates for interview. You could have somebody that turns you down too, super
Then I
competitive.
don't take it, right? I mean, I'll say nothing.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
That's good.
Do they apply for more than one job?
A lot do. In this case, you don't have, of the ones you've identified, you don't have a lot that happen to be in that space.
Oh, okay.
That's, I mean, you think you have a great point. You look pretty cool. So can I, who will be writing this down? I'll read it.
I think Heather's
Oh,
gonna take 2
yeah,
minutes,
sorry,
right?
that's my job.
That's okay.
Focus. Sorry.
So the motion is that the board would invite the following candidates to interview for the superintendency. That would be candidate 52, 204, 621, 821, 1020, 1794, 1951, and 1970. And if you want to read back to me, I'll double check.
52, 204, 621, 821, 1020, 1794, 1951, and 1970.
All right, so we need somebody to make a motion for that?
I make a motion that we bring forward the candidates as defined. Seconded.
Then moved and supported. Any comments, questions? All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
Fantastic.
Nice, well done.
Nice board here.
Are we still doing 50-minute interviews?
Well, we're gonna do interview questions first, and then we're gonna, so I'm gonna hand out two things to you. I know the one I just keep handing out to you, You noticed it was in the top of your applicant pile too, so notice I keep putting that selection criteria back in front of you. So make sure. So I'm gonna hand out the selection criteria again. I want you to have it right there when we talk about interview questions. So let me just slide that down to you. Then I'm gonna hand out draft interview questions. Again, we're gonna tear these apart, so just read through the whole document. I need a copy though. And I'm gonna give you a minute to do that, so don't feel like you have to rush. You guys just want to do like a lot of phone calls.
You can do it in the morning.
And again, as soon as you get with them, and I know we've said this, but just to clarify, and they accept, it's public.
Yeah, I publish it all in one fell swoop though.
Right.
So I'm not.
Right, and we're not gonna go out, is it once you,
Individual.
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Sir, really great questions.
I was
I
gonna
know,
say,
I loved it too. I was like, okay, we're done.
Uh-huh, absolutely. You've done this before.
It's not my first rodeo.
Right.
And I never try to just do the same thing. Every time I always think about district and everything I heard that you guys talk about.
I assume that you selected this from a broader list of questions based on, there's some unique questions here that look really perfect for our district? Or is it the
I
same?
used to use a master list. Now I pretty much handwrite them each time.
Oh, really?
Because I'm just used to doing it, and then I think more intently about the district. And so some of them might be a little wordy or a little long or not quite right. The bigger issue is, am I missing one that's more important, you know? And so we'll just, we'll edit and rotate out accordingly. People always say that, will you send me your master list questions? Nope.
That's a good question.
Absolutely.
I remember when we did, maybe a couple searches ago, the facilitator asked each board member, if you had to say one word to describe the person that you're looking for, what would it be? And I thought that was just such a great way to make us encapsulize. It was so hard to do that one word. But I'm wondering, in these questions, where a person might be able to say, like, these are the characteristics that I find most important. I know we've got a leadership question there, but it talks about leadership style versus character and integrity, and what that person thinks is most important in leadership. It's not a star question. It's
Yeah.
and maybe that's something that we would wait to. I'm always just interested in what a person's philosophy is about leadership. What do they believe is the most important thing in a leadership role?
Yeah. I'm thinking, so here's how I think that we should go after this, and then we'll come back to that. I think it's best if you guys read through the whole list. Because at first it does look good. You're like, oh, these are good questions. But really, maybe they're not, right? Like, there's no way I accurately captured what all of you want. It's just not the case, right? So first read through the whole thing, and then check in with yourself, which is kind of what you're doing, and say, wait a minute, what's missing here that's critically important to me? Because we want to start with what's missing, because we want to figure out if we have to build some questions in. Then we can talk about what questions need to be adjusted or removed. One of the challenges, one of the potential challenges about what you described is, remember when we created the selection criteria, we were supposed to be getting to a shared understanding of what we're looking for.
Right.
So if we didn't do that, and we ask a question like open-ended like you're describing, each of you probably have a different idea of what kind of values or beliefs are important in leadership. And so you each may be processing that information quite differently. Doesn't mean we don't do it, but we got to think about, those things that are going to get us to the criteria, and also to what all the board values as far as being important.
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of specific to Waterford, is that round two, or is this are these more general leadership, global questions, or specific to Waterford? Like, should I give my scenario, my thought, or?
Before you do that, let me just say that so my practice is not to ask, so first of all, if all 8 of these people agree, there is a significant imbalance of information that they would have about the district. Just take a minute and digest that. So asking them a question like, what do you think are the strengths of Waterford? Or what would you change about Waterford? Anything that requires that kind of information is kind of like, when did you quit beating your wife? It's not a fair question. All your candidates are going to have different access, so.
I agree, right,
Okay.
that's not what I meant.
Good.
So what I meant was like, we know with our significant student loss that we're going to be having to close a building, like within the next few years.
It's funny.
So what, so that.
Do we know that?
We don't know that. That's why
No, because I asked that question, and everybody's like, I don't know where you're coming, not everybody, let's say half the people have said to me, I don't know where you're coming up with that. And I'm like, oh, whoa, pump the brakes.
Okay. Well,
So
that's a different conversation than I've had with Keith in the past. So my point is, if, like, getting around, asking a question like that, how would this person, do they have experience in handling that? What would their process be? Community involvement? Do they have a background in doing something like that?
I'm so with you, because I wrestled that question. Because what checked me was those people who were like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? So let me ask if this could be a friendlier question that wouldn't presuppose the outcome. Tell us about your experience right-sizing a district. Is that something everybody can live with? And that way we're not presupposing how it gets to right-sized?
Well, that's even better, because there's.
Well, question 12 kind of
It
does.
does kind of, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess difficult decision, but difficult decision could be what curriculum to adopt or math. Sometimes that can be like, you know, the sky is falling. So, I think, you know, when you're, you know, jobs and people and the structure, restructuring, right sizing, I guess is the word now, but those kinds of things, I think the next superintendent is gonna have to deal with that. There's no way when we're losing 400 that we can sit here and say, who's saying that? I mean, like, that is kind of an odd answer.
So-
Instead of someone getting.
I still have some from last semester. So what I'm gonna do is park that. At the bottom was a potential addition, and we'll field addition, you know, we'll go around the table and see what else there is, and we'll check that. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just on that, it's a hypothetical, and it could happen anywhere, so I don't know necessarily that, the asking the right size, like, how would you right size a district, is specific to Waterford, so I think it could be a decent question, is what I'm saying, is because it, you know, that could happen in any district, and just what we know about student trends is all districts are losing students, right? And so some districts are starting to end up in situations where they could have to right size, or they could not have to, whatever the situation would be. But I think it's a fair question to ask in today's day and time, with what all school districts are going through across the state of Michigan, with loss of population, in K through 12.
Thank you. So when the rest of you looked around, or even those that have already spoken, were there other kind of questions or topics that you felt were just definitely missing?
I was gonna suggest challenges, but you addressed that already, so.
I think number 4, and, I think, it's a good question, but I think it needs to dig a little further. Just maybe including something like, because this is about cultivating a productive relationship with the board, so I take that as how would the superintendent cultivate a cultivate a productive relationship with the board, but I also would like to know how would the superintendent help, you know, bridge divides amongst the collective group. You know, so, you know, kind of being a leader to the effect of, you know, keeping that relationship with the board good, but also helping collectively bridge divides amongst our group.
On the board specific?
Yeah, but again, I don't know if that's really a superintendent's responsibility.
I think it's a
More-
leadership quality.
But again, we're his bosses somewhat.
But
So, I mean, it would be between us more so than a superintendent to get involved in friction of board members. I think that'd be asking him to stick his neck out a little bit to where he might not want to. Be more politics than productivity, I think.
yeah, and I get that, but I think there are times we all sometimes have to question our bosses, right? And sometimes we have to stick our neck out a little bit to try to bridge gaps amongst a group, because collectively we're a team, right? You have a superintendent and a board that work together, direction and decisions that are made. So, I mean, I'm open to it, I just think that I would like that question to go a little deeper, but I'm one person, so.
But yeah, the relationship would be, if he felt the board member was, you know, not behaving or doing whatever, he could reach out to the board in that relationship and say, hey, you know, to everybody get along, can't you do this? That would be part of that relationship. Not necessarily it can't be his responsibility at all.
But here's what I think. What I'd like to do is continue to surface potential topics that we've missed. Then we'll look at what questions we have room for and kind of prioritize from there. I think that's a reasonable approach to this.
Honestly, I really feel like you've covered.
I know what I keep reading them over and over and over, what am I missing, but
The only one I had was that you and I were kind of in line about that they knew a little bit about budget, and we have, you know, a decent amount of kids that are IEP or special education, or, you know, somebody who's, I know some of them had experience in that, but some of them had said that they had a lot of experience in dealing with that, and Title I, Title II, things like that. Should we ask a question like that? Like, what kind of experience do you have with that? We have a large free and reduced lunch population.
A money
Is
question.
that?
Well, those are not.
Is that an?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Question?
we kind of jumped things there. So, on the financial budget, you've got 2 general questions about that. If the question is more about special education, state and federal grants, that kind of thing, I don't know, it didn't come up high when we talked about selection criteria. So we could kind of couch it as something that we want to explore in the second round. I think that's something you guys need to decide about what's most important in the first round, especially as a comparative.
About the money in the programs.
Right.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Just off topic, in your experience with having 8 in a first round, what would be your projection? Do you have even a thought of a second round? How many? Just
Yeah, you're gonna need to go to 2 or 3 or you're gonna lose your best candidates anyway.
Right.
So even though you're casting a wider net in the beginning,
Yeah.
you can't move 4 or 5 forward into a second. They'll think you're not serious about it and they'll just back
What
out.
do you think, like 3 into a second?
I'd say 3 max.
2 to 3?
Mhm.
Okay.
We'll have some hard conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we have been talking about 50-minute interviews. We would do 10-minute breaks, and I want you to picture, so what that would look like. We're gonna come back to these questions, but, so we're gonna do 10-minute break. So first interview, 10-minute break, second interview, 20-minute break, so that you can use the facilities, get something to eat, something to drink. Interview, 10-minute break, interview.
And are we thinking like starting at like 6? Just because as we move, I want to think, what time are we going to start too? Because I don't want to go super late.
We gotta start at like 5.
It's a
That, and
really
see,
long
that's, I
night.
think that's
Yes,
tough,
it's gonna be
starting at
tough.
5 is.
I think it's scheduled for 6:30.
Is okay, that's
So we'll wanna,
perfect.
I'm just looking, I think, so
Yeah.
we'll wanna do an adjustment. I can
Yeah.
obviously come earlier as long as you guys can come earlier. That,
I think we gotta look at what's the date, we have a date.
Well, I'm earlier than 5.
It's a week
5
from
to
today.
What about 5:30 though, because we've got 4 hours and 20 minutes.
But are we gonna do 4 or are we gonna
Wait,
go with?
let's
3,
talk
3,
one
2?
at a time. And so, I'm sitting here looking for my phone, maybe I'll look at my car, that could be,
You call it?
no, it would be on vibrate. I never have it on ring, I'm always in board meetings, how can I have my
Yeah,
phone
that's
ring?
right.
My husband's like, why do you have a phone? You I must have left it in my car, so, right.
22nd, 23rd?
Monday, Tuesday. That seems to me, that's a very late, I mean, I don't mind staying, but for a candidate, that seems like, okay, we're gonna take you on at 11 o'clock
I
at night
agree.
and
Show
start
me up.
interviewing you at
Yeah.
11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
That seems like
I don't function.
crazy.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's the same as we tell our kids.
Are we gonna do 2 or 3 nights though?
That's the question, is it's more about then, are we able to find a third night? Because then we could break some of it up and do 3, 3, 2. Because the last night we talk about who to bring forward for second time.
Right.
So that's what that would look like.
Can we start earlier? Can we start at 5:30?
That'd be pushing for me.
It's,
Is
yeah.
it doable, I guess is the question, because that would take us till 9, almost 10 o'clock if we,
I can, on Tuesday,
9:30.
6:30 is the earliest I can be here. But, then that was what I had in my calendar for.
Well, I think we have it set for next week, right?
yeah.
Monday, Tuesday. Any chance we go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Wednesday's open for me.
Wednesday's open for
I'm
me.
open Wednesday.
You guys, I don't have it open now.
You don't have it
sorry.
open.
Give me a second.
We're gonna do without you.
What about
Okay.
Sunday?
No, I'm joking. Yeah.
You think that's a good idea?
We have a day the following week, I wish I would have brought it, I meant to put it in my planner, but I know we have a day the following week.
The 30th?
The 30th was gonna be a second interviews.
Thursday, the 25th, is that?
Well, the other option is to shorten the interviews.
Yep, that is an option.
if we shorten the interviews and started
Yeah,
earlier,
third night.
I mean, we could, because it seems like the third night would be hard. But maybe, I could probably try to get here earlier, you know, on that Tuesday, so, I mean, we start at like 5:30 or something.
Well, who can, I mean, even a half hour would help. Who can start earlier than 6:30 on Monday and Tuesday?
I could do 6.
I could do
Six.
Is
6.
6 doable for
I
everybody?
could do 6.
Yes.
But 6 is pretty much it.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
If we did a third night, the 24th, though, you can't be here, correct, Anna? So then, is that right? And then,
24th, 25th, or 26th?
the
26th
25th
is a Friday.
You're not gonna have something better to do on Friday night?
No, trust me, we don't.
So just good times here.
I have better things to do, yes.
What? There's nothing more important than this.
I didn't say more important,
See,
but better.
that's, you say that, and that's why I'm not a fan of shortening the interview, just, you know, I look at like all of these questions, and I think by the time we go through these and they answer, we're gonna be close to the 50 minutes, and I hate
Well, the other thing is,
eliminating.
We give them the questions that are prep form, let them know they have this much time to,
second round's gonna be far more detailed.
you know?
Yeah.
That way they can
It's
get
on
rid of
them.
the fluff, yeah.
It's on them to be managing their time. They have the
Right. Yeah.
questions, you have 45 minutes to answer them, and you try to get them through it because we want something that's efficient. So
Yep.
they can be put on the spot and, yeah, it's tough, I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, we picked all of these people in what, 3 days? They
Which
should be able to
amazes me.
prepare in
I
5.
cannot believe that we didn't get a couple, I was gonna put the one guy down, just,
Okay. So here are possible, here's some ideas. So one idea is what's already been surfaced, which is we just start at 6 o'clock on the 22nd and 23rd. I don't think you should drastically shorten your interviews, but you could cut 5 minutes. We started at 6 o'clock. The last interview would finish at 9:40. I want you to know you're not walking out the door at 9:40.
10 o'clock.
Because we're gonna, the first night, you're gonna take feedback forms home with you so that you can read them before you come back. I know that's exciting too, but you gotta do it, it's important. Second night, we'd probably be here till 10:30. I mean, I just want you to realistically understand. And I don't know what your norms are, so to me, I mean, I go to districts all over the state, so some districts I'm in, that's the most normal thing in the world. Other districts, it's like, what, that's really late.
And then that's an extra hour and a half for you to get home, so.
Yeah, but I mean, that means, all the places I've been, no worries.
But it's one less trip she has to take
The
here.
following.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about me in this, honestly, it's
But
my
let's
job.
just trying
So,
to
so
find a
that,
day.
that's a scenario, so that would be 45-minute interviews, so we just trimmed 5 off of each one. That's kind of what those 2 nights look like. I do want you to feel good about this. You also have to think about your stakeholders and how they're gonna be able to kind of hang in for this. So we could use that Friday, I mean, Friday the 26th is open for me, so we could do Monday, Tuesday, Friday. That's a possibility.
9 o'clock, to me, just seems so late to start an interview, not only for the candidate, for us after we've been there already 3 hours, 3.5, and community too. Now, and if we do that, I'm fine with it. It just wouldn't be my choice. My choice would rather be to break it up into 3 nights than 2 really late nights.
That'd be my preference as well. I'm not available on that Friday.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Oh, okay, that's good to know. So will you be gone that Saturday, the 27th as well?
I'm not against the weekend.
Yeah, why, well,
Can we use the day that we set aside for follow-up for final interviews and then add another day? I don't know, I'm just trying to get
I'm just
people-
wondering, could we do well, this totally changes it. I mean, why couldn't we do them all on Saturday the 27th? Start in the morning.
I got
Yeah,
good with that.
because we-
I was gonna say by the 5th one, I'd be I think.
Might have to be
We shut that down early. Remember, we talked about the possibility of Saturday, and people were excited about it.
Well, just doing them all at one time would be.
I think the 2 days, I think it's, I mean,
I mean,
think
if
it's
we
okay.
do the 2 days, I'm fine with it. I'm not a fan of it, but I'm fine with it. You know, if everybody else is good with it, I'd rather have a third day. 9 o'clock, starting an interview, and just.
I totally agree, I just think we're gonna have a hard time finding a day.
Yeah, I don't think we are. That's, 25th is not good?
I'm sorry.
That's you.
Oh, you can't do it.
And it'd be one thing if it was a different night of interviews for you, but I mean, the last night of interviews with you, I would not wanna not be here to
Right,
facilitate
no,
the conversation
we
on. And I wouldn't wanna ask one of my colleagues to, so unfortunately, I'm gonna not district that night.
24th too, somebody can't do 24th, right? 24th and
Did you want to look at my
25th.
calendar?
No.
Looks kinda okay.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah.
My staff is always like,
Oh, man.
Again, we have a hard time getting together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think.
Again, I agree with you, I'd rather do it in 3, but if we have to do it in
I think
2.
we just gotta
Wait,
do it in
I
2.
don't- What if we, okay, so when is final interviews? That's Tuesday the
we like
30th?
to call them second.
Second,
interviews.
I mean, second round.
That's what we like to call
We
it.
like to call them second interviews.
So it would be too late to do the third night, the day before the second round.
Because you have to give people a heads up, and
Yeah.
they have to make it, we got people that are gonna be,
Right.
Also, the more time between them, it becomes.
Yeah, harder to
difficult.
compare,
It
yeah, I
does.
understand.
It
So it's
does.
really gotta be that week.
Yeah.
the only other thing is if, like, at 5:30, but it's, it sounds like it's people can't make it.
It's rough.
That's, that'd be
And
tough.
we don't even know that everybody will accept. I
Yeah.
mean, do you assume everybody will accept?
I
Do other people?
If they-
I mean, I'll be
Work into-
surprised, only because you don't have a lot of people in this mix that are trying to get in other places.
Okay.
These are people who want to be here.
Okay.
And so I'll be surprised, I mean, I think these folks are gonna confirm.
Okay, cool.
I think
Yeah.
the 22nd and the 23rd.
I'll stay up
just
past my
make it
bedtime.
I know, right?
Get out.
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice, right? I mean, we
It's
really
not
don't.
ideal, but this is what we gotta do.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Do we need to have, I just wanna ask, 20 minutes seems like a long time for that in between.
I agree.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
We
too.
could trim that a little bit.
Or we could even play it 10, if it's 10, 15.
Yeah, maybe play it, see how.
Yeah, and I mean, if we could start a little
We
sooner.
can't, because we have to tell them when to be there.
I told them to come 15 minutes.
I'm just gonna say, I bet they're gonna be there already. They're gonna be there and ready to go.
So let's
Great.
get through the questions
Okay.
now, because I wanted it to be very real. See how real it got? You
Sure.
Start thinking about being here at 10 to midnight, is that
Right.
good? So now let's button up these questions, but now we have to have fewer questions, because we're taking it to 45 minutes. And so,
We don't just let the candidate know they have 45 minutes, they have to get through this.
I do let the candidates know how much time they have, but I also know, so right now, based on the conversation we just had, we have potentially 19 questions. And usually, it's closer to 3 minutes, sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. It's always funny when somebody has like 2 minute answers, and you're like, that might be perfect or awful. It really depends on what they said.
We had a few of those last time.
Yeah,
Where
that's
we had
interesting.
some that got done really quick.
Yeah.
So,
But they're all time boxed now,
Yeah.
so.
here's what I wonder. You're okay with the candidates not asking questions?
Right.
Okay, so that's okay. And you're okay with me having the prompting the board president to move to the last question. So we're gonna have a hard stop on these, we're not gonna let them run on. So, we probably, right now we have kind of 19 questions on the table. We probably could get by with just cutting one. And we didn't finalize the 2 that we added, so we can still revisit that. So now let's walk through, I want you to look at the first 3 questions that you see if there's anything you want changed, or you're good with all 3 of them.
The first 3?
Yep, we're just gonna do them in blocks of 3 now, just to make sure you're all in.
Isn't 1 or 2 similar? What qualifications have prepared you to be next superintendent? Again, what does he want to do with his job? But it kind of runs together, I guess.
They are very
Yeah.
similar, so technically 2 could be struck if it needed to be.
I like it, I really like it,
Okay.
because it's, what is it about
Specific.
Waterford?
Why did you choose them?
Yeah,
Really
1
like
and 2
it.
kind of flow into each
But-
other, and it gives them an opening
Can
statement.
1 and 2 be combined? as one question.
The time is the same when you combine.
Right, no,
them.
I know, but at least the candidate might try to compress it more.
I mean, what do you guys think about making question 2, making it like the closing question? In other words, replacing what is now the closing question.
Well, he has to have a key sheet. They have an opportunity to
Okay.
sell us.
Okay.
That's their selling point. I feel.
I think we need that.
We'll,
Yeah.
To
we'll see
finish.
if there's something else we can scratch that. So are we ready to move to questions 4, 5, and 6?
Yeah.
Okay, take a look at those.
If you're trying to axe one, I don't think 5 is.
And I'm thinking the same thing.
I agree, yeah.
To identify the stakeholders isn't
Yeah.
something that's,
We can say you need to talk to this person, and this person.
yeah.
Right.
Good point.
Okay?
I
I,
like 6.
and number 4, I just wanted to amend, add the expertise.
I disagree.
Whatever language.
Yeah.
Disagree.
I,
How would you phrase it, Jensen?
I think, so how would you go about cultivating a productive relationship, with the Board of Education and/or bridge gaps amongst the collective group? So, because I think what it is that you're just talking about the relationship between the superintendent and the board, but I also, and maybe they'll include it in their answer, but how would you be, a good leader, or, how would you help the board collectively work good together? Because I think that is a piece of what the superintendent does, is that, bridging any divides amongst the group, because overall, you're helping to lead the organization. And it's a responsibility of the board as well, of us as collective board members, but I don't want that piece to be ignored, because I think it's an important one. So,
I just need that board governance. You're talking about board governance specifically, correct? Which is,
It's
it
not,
implies that it's their job.
no,
and
I don't think it does though. I think it gets them to, I think, to talk about how are they good at bridging gaps or divides amongst groups of individuals, we could even say. And I think that's something that a superintendent has to do.
Well, question
Because
7
does
talks
that.
about it broadly,
Yep.
Yeah.
but not the board. You actually had another statement when you were talking, and I wish, can't always keep up with you, John. That was something about how would you support the board in, can you remember what you said? It actually was a third idea that might be the better option, the bridge between the two, so it's not the original question, it's not the question you're suggesting that not everybody's buying into. It's actually a different one that might hit the mark. Do you remember what you said? I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
can't capture it.
Let's go to the tape.
Yeah, I know.
and it's one of the things, again, it would evolve in a politics type of a thing, and I want here to be as neutral as possible. I once had a superintendent tell me that something about, it didn't matter so long as he had four votes, he was right. It upset me tremendously, but he was right. It's about moving forward. I mean, he needs 4 votes to move forward. If he tries to play back and forth with people, that's politics in it. It takes away his credibility.
What if we just add the word with and amongst? What if we say, based on your research of the district, how would you go about cultivating a productive relationship with and amongst the Board of Education?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I can go with that.
Thank you. Okay, so we handled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's take a look at 7, 8, 9 now.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
I don't think we want to remove any of
I
those.
agree.
Yeah.
How do you eliminate any of those?
Okay, we're gonna go on then to 10, 11, and 12.
Okay, wait a minute. So 8 and 10 are slightly similar.
Yeah, they are similar.
Yeah.
Yep, they both talk about student achievement.
I
like
personally,
it
I was
better.
actually looking and then I thought, you know what, this is my personal opinion, that's what we're here to do. I kind of like, there's 2 questions about it. They're slightly different in terms, but if we need to remove one, the two that I thought were kind of similar were 11 and 13.
Although and again, I agree with you, Joan, but when you read
Yeah.
8 and 10,
Yeah.
they both say the same thing, they both say
Yeah.
increasing student achievement.
Unless you strike it in 10 and you leave just the first part of the phrase, which is a much tougher, yeah.
I like 8 a lot.
So what was your suggestion, Donna?
If in 10, if you strike beyond the and, so it's just the first part of the, what is your approach to,
Yep.
then it becomes very much about that.
Oh,
Could you not say, please explain how you have improved, well, it's different than what is your approach? Well,
Yeah,
no,
so-
it's- we're asking improving instruction. What is your approach and how have you improved instruction and student achievement?
Yeah, you
What
could,
was she
you-
saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they actually explore two different topics depending on
Yeah.
if you strike that second phrase or not. So,
So 8 is student achievement and 10 would be improving instruction.
instructional.
And I personally like, in a district, that's our focus, that's what we're here to do, that we have 2 questions about that. And that's just my humble opinion.
well, let's hold on, I mean, let's keep that as a
Yeah,
possibility.
hold it as a possibility,
I think
yeah.
we need to resolve the issue of striking
I like just striking it
of,
and increasing.
well, or are 11 and 13 more similar, and you want to get rid of one of those?
I feel like 13 is more relevant than 11. Because,
Right, what would your approach be to Waterford? What do you know
Yeah.
about Waterford? It'll
what do
It
you
shows what
know,
homework
what's
they've
your
done
thoughts
also.
on Waterford, not
Yeah.
an innovative approach that might work one place, may not, I don't know, I just feel like,
And how would they know what our
Specific-
finances per se?
Yeah, that's the
That-
challenge,
that's that
this is
loaded
an imbalance.
question.
Well, there you go, is it right?
Is it
Yeah.
loaded to suggest?
So maybe we strike 13?
but isn't that part of the, I mean, if you're
Just
coming
a
here, you
revision,
should be doing
yeah.
your homework.
Unless
It
we
kinda tells
replace,
you, yeah.
unless
what
you
checked out
replace
about us.
13 with the right sizing question. Remember, so the question
Yeah, I
that
like
was
that.
Yeah,
surfaced
what are the
was,
two that you do have added?
Yeah, the 2 that you have added.
tell us about your experience right sizing a school district. So 13 could go to that, if you're all amenable to it.
I'm good with that.
Sure.
Yeah, I like that. What do you guys think?
I guess that,
Absolutely.
look it up, just get along.
So the other question that we had was the one that you guys reconciled about the board governance, so you already took care of that. So, that means we're at the right size right now? You know,
Should
we're-
we still look at
took out
14,
five.
15,
We
right
we
size
still,
our
we still need to
questions?
look at them, but
Yes.
at least we're not like having to
Good.
strike.
Okay.
We took off 5, didn't we, already?
I'll do a capture, but yes, we did take
Okay,
it.
okay, so we're,
5 still.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, so we're in pretty good shape. So now let's take a look at 13, 14, and 15. We already struck 13 and we replaced it with, tell us about your experience. Right sizing a school district. Anything changes wise in this section?
And we've got instruction, curriculum, and student achievement, all unique questions, which I think is really great. And they're interspersed, which is also nice. 'Cause
Yep.
So then we're just looking at 16, 17.
16. I agree. Much more than 17.
Yes.
So that means we're right at 17 questions, 45 minutes.
Oh, yeah, because we got rid of 5.
So,
you're right, it's 16.
in terms of the order, I think we'll probably wanna, do we wanna say which question we want to be question 16? Because that's
cut
one
off.
they might, in case they're cut off,
Oh, what might be?
like,
You know what, we want to get the
17.
most important ones early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe, I would say 17.
Yeah.
John Paul, is that what you said? I agree.
Yes.
I think that's,
To do what?
to not
Do the
do
last.
question 17, that we actually make, because if Donna's gonna pass a note to Bob and say, please direct them to the last question, I think,
It feels really weird if they don't get to summarize.
I think
Well,
they have to
yeah.
have, they have to have
Yeah.
a closing
Yeah.
statement.
Yeah.
Have
I
to.
still feel like 1 and 2 are very similar. I feel like there must be a way
We're
to,
on 17.
what?
Well, do you want to, do you
I
want
know,
to?
but I keep coming back to it, because it
Well,
feels like.
Then let's do this, why don't we move question 2 to the second to last question? That way, if you run out of time on it, you don't mind that you cut that one.
That's what we're looking for, something to put in that spot.
Okay.
that we
Is that,
got.
is that livable for you?
Although 2 is kind of a nice question, because it truly is specific toward
It is.
Waterford.
I really, I
And I
like
like
it at the
that.
beginning.
I wanna know
I didn't
exactly
used to
why they
include
chose
it, now I'm
Waterford.
like, it's like.
I think that's a very important one, I would be very
I feel
curious
like
to know.
opening statement, your experience and your qualifications have prepared you, is everything else that we're asking. So essentially, we're saying, what's your experience and your qualifications? And then we're saying, what's your experience and your qualifications in leadership? What's your experience and qualifications in board relations? So I feel like, basically what we're asking for is a summary of everything that we're about to ask them. to
It's an
explain what's
icebreaker
again.
is what it is. They're
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
prepared to recant their resume, and that's usually a nice way for them to get comfortable.
I just feel like.
Well, just, let me finish the question, does it feel better for you if it's tell us, what has prepared you to be the next superintendent? So we're taking out experience and qualifications.
Yes.
Yep.
For me,
I like
yes.
that, I like
Yeah.
that, because it kind of combines 1 and 2, right? Are you
They'd
saying
still be
No, we're
separate.
still keeping 2.
keep
aren't
2
we?
separate?
Or what?
It just,
I feel like 1,
I would
2,
keep
and
them.
17.
I like
Because I've
that.
seen a lot of answers, I might separate them and space, you know, where they are, but I would keep them both.
Okay, yeah.
If you think we can get through all these in 45, then.
Are we gonna give them the questions?
Yes.
Are we gonna,
That's our, we haven't resolved it yet, that's the next thing that we're gonna
Because-
talk about.
I think if we did that, and we told them they had 45 minutes, they would be concise,
Equal one.
45 to 50. Then they
What
would
would be
be
the plan?
short, concise, and they would have to package themselves together and, you know what I mean? This is your one shot. Yeah, this is your one shot to be our guy, I
Yeah, and then
think,
plan then,
or
one shot.
woman.
See, I don't remember last time, I don't remember one candidate in our even original interviews that ran out of time. Every candidate, I think,
They were
finished
very
before their time. And
Yeah.
so I think they're going to rehearse their answers, they're gonna know, and I think we're gonna get through them, no problem, and have a few minutes to spare.
And I feel
Just
comfortable
because from
about the list.
experience.
Yeah, I agree.
I do agree with Heather, separating those would be,
If you put number 2 at that
have
background,
them both on there.
what about the job appeals to you, and then, then he gives them his closing statements, after he gives his,
so move number 2 to be the second to the last question, so that if they can't answer something, they might not be able to
or
answer that
it just,
one.
it brings it up and it leads them
Yeah.
into
To
why
the final
Waterford, and
statement.
then the closing statement of, I've done this and this, and I'd love to come here. So it's
Right.
2 questions about Waterford, about our community, what they would like.
Right.
Okay? Sure. Do you want me to recap what we did? Or are you good?
I'm good if you took
Right.
notes, right?
I took,
Yeah.
I took notes.
Yeah.
Could you recap that?
I'd be happy to.
Which-
So, number 1, we struck experience and qualifications, so it's a more general statement. We moved the second question to second to last question. Question 4 was amended to add with and among the Board of Education.
With and amongst, right?
I'll do the grammarly on it, make sure it's right. Strike community, or the 5 questions, sorry. Then moving to the second page, we struck on question 10 that and phrase, so it's just about instruction. Question 13, we struck entirely and replaced it with, they tell us about your experience politicizing the school district. And the remainder of the questions remain the same. Other than we added that, second to last one in
Yeah.
the front.
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, we have one more thing to do tonight. I know, we're
Good job, nice
What
work.
a nice board we are.
That's what we're talking about next. So I kind of anguished over this.
Do you want to wait just a minute? We lost 2 of them.
Sure.
Okay.
When I was driving here today, I kept thinking about Brian Liston used to be like, no problem, I can get there in an hour.
From Lansing?
Yeah, what exactly was he doing?
That's great. He didn't tell you how to do it.
It's like,
Do that on Gateway.
I can't get here.
That's about it.
I mean, we usually put 2 hours on my schedule to get here. And then this time I think I got 15 minutes into the 2-hour mark, which still should have given me extra time, and I still was late. It's like, what was he doing when he drove?
Are you coming from East Lansing or Okemos or?
Nope, right from Lansing proper, so.
Okay.
But that wasn't what did it today. Today was at 59.
And 59 whereabouts is what did it? Was it?
On Highland Road, right?
It started, yeah, as soon as
Yeah.
one whole lane was closed
Yeah.
Was it?
for miles and miles.
Yeah, all through Highland is,
Miles,
yeah,
yeah.
from US
Yeah.
23 all the way down,
Oh.
yeah. So you hit almost near,
That's how ICE time is now.
Is it? I haven't been on it.
Don't do it. I'm just telling you, don't do it.
Don't
It
do
was
it.
I-75.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Just between here and Troy and Warren.
Might have been Luther and Warren. Well, we're not coming to University.
And we decided we're giving them questions.
We need to resolve that right
I was gonna
now.
say, I don't think we did that.
I'm agreeing, I want to be.
What's the will of the group? Give the candidates the questions, don't give the candidates the question.
I say give it to them.
I do too.
So
I
it's
agree.
fair across the board.
And then it's fair across the board. Because first night, second night, that's a really tough handicap if you're, first one up
Is that
and
the
everyone gets to hear.
I mean, and again,
No,
I know it's our.
no,
our
it
decision.
totally varies
I mean,
by
it doesn't-
district.
I'm just curious. It doesn't matter to me.
Does it speed things up at all? Like as far as are they more succinct when we do? No. I mean, yeah.
Not usually, I mean, I can only speak from my past experience, and
My experience has been that not giving the candidates the questions beforehand, but I'm not against it in this situation. You know, because I understand we got 8 candidates coming and we don't want to deal with any issue of, people thinking other people have questions or, anything like that.
Keeps our
Do you
kids
generally,
open.
in the second round, not give them? Or you give
I would
them the
never
second?
give
Never
them
give
the
them the
second
second,
round.
yeah.
Never, what'd you
We're
say?
not
I would
looking
never
to
give
do
it to them in the
catch-up.
second
Oh,
round.
okay, right, okay, so then,
I mean, you also need to be able to, to assess their ability to.
Think on their
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah.
right, that would be that was my question, like, that would be the only thing we're not seeing, the,
Right.
like,
Yep.
think on the spot, but if
Okay.
we do the second time.
There's more of a dog and pony show.
So we're going to give them the questions, they'll all get them at the same time when I send them an email about preparing for the interview, so that's how that will happen. So no worries there. Okay, so what we have left to talk about is, let me set the context for this. So remember that last time I came, I shared the, we're not using that, it's just I shared the stakeholder input that there was major themes that emerged during the stakeholder feedback for the search. What I didn't do a deep dive on, because you weren't all here and I wanted to make sure you were all here, was the feedback specifically about the Board of Education. And so part of what happens when we do a search and we're having, face-to-face meetings with your stakeholders and we have the survey open is your community looks to us to be accountable to what they tell us. So if we don't accurately reflect what we heard from them, they begin to question the whole process, right? It becomes an issue of integrity. And so while this is maybe not comfortable and not for you or for me, or even maybe for them, to have to talk about this in a public meeting, we do have to talk about this in a public meeting. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how are we going to have this conversation, especially knowing who's going to be playing. And so I also, when we do a search, we assure people of their confidentiality when they're candid, both in those face-to-face conversations and also in the survey. So here's what we did. So we took all of that data, all of those, the narrative, and open-ended questions. And really, I had somebody who doesn't know any of you, who doesn't know anything about your district, she does consulting work for us just on data. I had her do an independent analysis of it. Okay, and then I had her put the feedback specifically about the board in very specific categories. Because I thought that was the best way to go after it, is let's look at what is it that they're talking to us about, our behavior, that we can wrap our mind around and think about, you know, what that means and try to take the kind of personal stuff out of it. So that was how I approached it. So I'm gonna keep a copy and then hand it down. And what you're looking at are really those 7 major kind of themes that emerged specifically around the community's concerns around the Board of Education. So remember in that survey, they have to identify kind of, you know, current environment, 3 to 5 years, what's the greatest challenge or the challenges that the district is facing. So that summary statement at the top is my telling you, Board of Education was the #1 site challenge, both in the face-to-face meetings and in the stakeholder survey. So that's why I'm handling it this way. You don't want to pull it apart to kind of have a separate conversation. So I'm sure you all have different reactions to kind of what you're reading. What I'm going to ask you to do, in fairness to the folks, is there are 7 here. It's not, I mean, it is kind of a coincidence. I'm going to ask you to go around the table and kind of read, each of you read one out loud. And then what we're going to do is just kind of have a conversation about what's our reaction, what do we think about this, what implications, and all that kind of thing. So who will start by reading number 1? Thank you.
The Board of Education's conduct is harmful to the district and our students.
Let's do the next one.
Just move, I'll read it. Members of the Board of Education pursue their own individual agendas regardless of the damage it does to the district and our students.
Thank you.
The Board of Education is an embarrassment to the district.
Members of the Board of Education speak poorly in public about the district and their fellow board members.
The Board of Education is hostile towards the superintendent and administration.
Members of the Board of Education fight with each other at the board table and in public.
The Board of Education obstructs and micromanages the work of the superintendent and administration.
Thank you. So, when you read through these, what stands out for you? Like, what jumps out?
I guess, can I ask a clarifying question? Because
Sure.
I wasn't able to come to last meeting. How many people, how many respondents? I know there was a breakup, I can't recall what it was.
There was, I'm gonna ball,
200.
I was gonna say, Bob was gonna ballpark it at 220.
220, and there was a breakup too between staff and.
There was, and I actually disaggregated it to see if the trends were different, and they weren't. So that was a consistent concern for those folks who are employed by the district and not employed by the district. Good question.
And I think just to that, I think when I remember the numbers, it was more employees or of the district that did the survey than actual community members, correct? I mean, it was a small difference, but from what I remember correctly, it was, I think it was,
Yeah, I thought it was pretty well matched.
I thought it was 203 and it was, I think it was 97 and like 108 or something like that. But it was pretty,
It was pretty
there
close.
was more though, employees in the survey though, that is correct, than actual community members. Cause I remember that stuck out to me.
I'll be honest, I mean, we went over that, so I didn't bring that data. I will.
That stuck out to me.
I will say
remember
that's,
that.
that's almost always true in search, that more staff respond than citizens do. I can't remember your specifics honestly, since we presented it previously.
See, it's kind of shocking, but kind of sad too. I mean, 74,000 people, you know, in Waterford.
0.002%
Right.
of the population.
But then you take a percentage of the employees. I mean, we're talking 12% of the employees and 0.0002 of the public.
I just want to be careful here, though. A survey, however many people took it, it's a survey, and they usually do, statistically, if you do statistical analysis, they usually do speak when you have 200 respondents, and honestly, even if it doesn't, but it still represents the whole. And we can't dismiss this. We can't split hairs. We can't pretend like it's not here. All of this talking about how many, you know, the splitting hairs. To me, the greatest challenge facing Waterford School District is us. Period. That is our takeaway. That is what we should have as our takeaway. So the next question is, what do we do about it?
Well, I mean, I think we should get to that question. I do think before we go there, though, I think it's important to digest it.
Right, I don't think it was splitting hairs to understand more. I was just trying to understand.
No, I didn't think you were either. I wasn't speaking to you.
Well, and another thing too, I mean, I do think it does matter if it's a very small sample, because sometimes, you know, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. We also had an election recently that I think is a huge indicator to us about, you know, the direction of the board. We had an incumbent, you know, unseat the president. So I think our community has told us, and with a bigger voice, you know, about the change that, you know, they want to see too. So, it doesn't. I think a lot of these are kind of preset to the election too. A lot of these, the things that went on, it's been terrible. It has been, like, coming to board meetings has been terrible. So we have, I mean, we hopefully going forward, we will have, you know, a better vision and a better, you know, with the new superintendent, we'll be able to have different conversations. So I'm excited about that. So, but I think there's you know, not that just these 200 people, there's other factors as well. I also think all those people applying for our district also shows that we are not this horrible, terrible, awful problem. Because if we were this horrible, terrible, awful problem, those people would not want to come and work for us.
I think what's important to remember is this is perceptual data.
Right, exactly.
And so, perceptual data is relevant. And the intent, like Mike and I can tell you, my intent is not about making them feel uncomfortable or that this is supposed to feel kind of damning to anybody. It's more like thinking about, and maybe it's, I know John probably waiting to speak, so I don't want to step on your toes here. It's more about thinking, what are the implications? It's, you know, you can debate the validity of each assertion, right? Because remember, these are big buckets that the consultant sorted them into. But if the perception is out there, like I can tell you from the face-to-face conversations, so that you know, a lot of the face-to-face conversations, even before I started the official meeting to have a conversation, they were just telling me right immediately that was the issue. And I'll be honest, to the point where I started to say, well, these folks are elected. You know, like, they got there somehow. Because there is what I perceive as a real disconnect in this district as far as kind of the Waterford that was and the Waterford that is, honestly. So I think it's still really valuable to look at, okay, where's the substance in this? And how do we think about, as a board, governing in a way that contributes to the kind of outcomes that we want to create for students? I didn't like to hear how many staff said they just sat and watched the videos, and to the point where their perception of how long it took you to adopt an agenda, all of that becomes confirmation to the community that you're not able to function well. In reality, every board has its, good days and its bad days, and its issues that they can all coalesce around, and issues that they can't coalesce around, and there is a divide. And so my expectation in this conversation is not that we're gonna walk out the door a 7-0 board. It's not my expectation. But you can be a board that has very valid, differing opinions and still lead and communicate and treat each other in a way that you would want the students in this district to emulate, right? And I think that's a very realistic approach to how we choose to interact and how we choose to have conversations. I will say, every time I have come here and worked with you guys, I've enjoyed working with you. So I say all the time, I have a very different, I've had a very different interaction here. So I think it's worth a conversation about what could be different that would help to, mitigate those perceptions and create better outcomes. That's what I'm hoping for. Jump up.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about what Mary was saying with the election, and I think one of the key things that we saw in the election, the top 4 vote-getters, we had one incumbent, non-incumbent, get in the top 2, but the top 4 vote-getters, there was I think 200 votes between the 2, and I think one of the things we talked about at the last meeting is that one of the things that you found was that we're a divided community, and I think it plays a lot into what we're looking at here. And any one of those 7 things that we talked about, depending upon who you ask, they're going to blame that side of the board or this side of the board. So I think though there is validity to this, it's all in the eye of the beholder of which, I guess you could say side or who you like on the board is what it comes down to. So I mean, it is emblematic of the fact that we are community divided, unfortunately, and depending upon who you side with is how you're gonna see the situation and who's the problem with it. So I think what Mary's talking about is that the election really told us a lot of what it is with the community. That there was a solid number of people that wanted change, and there was a solid number of people that wanted to keep things the same. So the validity of it does come to question. I'm not trying to undermine what's been done here, because I'm sure you can do the best you can trying to get a survey. 200 people is a very small sample, and things can be skewed, and I'm not trying to undermine that survey, but what I'm saying is that, the conversation about the validity of it, and then the context and what we look at is something just to be considered. But I agree, I think everybody on this board would think that there's definitely something to be said here when people are coming and saying these things. But I can tell you this, this is what many of us as school board members, when we all live in this community, when we go to Kroger, when we go, I go pick my kid up from daycare and preschool. I mean, I'm in Waterford all the time, and so these are the things that we hear from people all the time. So to me, it's not really news. It's just whose side are you on? Is really what it is. I look at this, and this is what I hear from maybe not every single one of these, but these are things that you hear from people in the community. So I think that we all agree that there's definitely work that needs to be done. We've made our efforts. I think we're getting better. I'm hoping that the whole search process is going to bring us to better together even more as we take this on, and as we start the new fiscal year coming in July, that we'll be able to move better and move forward better.
Yes, please.
I think this says, as a group, we are not doing our job. That's what it says to me. Each and every single person around this table is not doing their job. I think 200 people is a lot of people. And I think we all need to look in the mirror, and we all need to take responsibility for our part in what this feedback says, every single one of us. And we can sit here and split numbers and split sides, but we're one board, and we're all responsible for this, in my opinion. And these 7 things apply to every single person around this table. They just do. And until people are willing to acknowledge that I might have ownership in this, nothing's gonna change.
I think when you gave your presentation, one of the things that you offer is board governance classes or the superintendent or something. Like I remember there was classes at the end or some kind of training that was exciting to me to see. because I think that's something that we've wanted, we tried, and then it kind of wheels fell off and it stopped. But I think that is our fundamental issue, and I've said it before at board meetings, that we have a different view of what our board member, a role of a board member is.
What the actual role is.
Yeah, and I think how I think is right, and the person who thinks opposite of me thinks their side is right. And it's, whether we oversee, and we are the checks and balances or not. And, or just everything's yes, it's fine, we hire them, we trust them, or we check and balance, and it's not insulting, in my opinion, to check and balance, but but I have people disagree with me, so, that I think is the core of it. In my opinion, when I look about like what is going wrong, why does this always keep happening? I think that's what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, see, so your take is, like, everybody has an idea of what the role of the school board is, but the difference is what one group thinks is micromanaging, the other group thinks is oversight.
Right.
And so that's where the issue is. I think clarity around that is important. I think that's a very specific approach that can be set and should be handled, with the board and the new superintendent as soon as, I would say as soon as the new superintendent begins, because you don't want to get too far down the road on that. So I think that's something that we can identify, right, as a clear task, for the group to engage in with the new superintendent. So that's a very useful suggestion. I guess the thing I'd like to respond to more as a, what I heard, it's not my own beliefs, because I'm not here long, I'm not here enough to have my own opinions about this. So there are two things that I heard quite a bit just about the divide on the board, and about the election too, that I think you need to think about. The first one is kind of like, yeah, there was, and I'm probably not going to articulate it quite the way that your stakeholders is, like, yeah, there's an election, but even those folks that got elected because they expected the things on the board to improve, and it's only gone downhill. And that's not my words, that's about people who showed up to talk in the stakeholder meetings. I don't know what was happening on this board before the new term and after the new term, you guys know that, but, so that's something to think about. I don't know what that specifically means, but you can think about that. And the second thing is that there are people who told me that they're not worried because they have the winning side, right? So like, when you think about staff thinking they have the winning side of a board, that's a losing proposition for everybody, even if people don't know that. And so, regardless of whether or not you have a difference of opinions in those difficult decisions, right? Because we know there's difficult decisions that need to be made, we just maybe don't know which decisions those are. If your own staff think they can influence you to get their way so that you can't look holistically, to make those decisions and support your superintendent when they're implementing and doing follow-through on those decisions, that's just going to continue kind of the downward decline that you described as far as enrollment in the district and circumstances in the district. So the board getting its arms around unity after board authority. So you know what I mean by that is, once the board comes to a decision, supporting that decision, that isn't even about training. That's about, buying into this. The democratic process is that you're going to share your differences of perspective at this table. That's going to contribute to the richness of the conversation and the deliberation. But then when the vote happens, when you walk out the door, you say to your stakeholders, we had a really deep conversation about that. There was lots of interesting things that we needed to think about. Ultimately, this was the decision of the board, and this is what we need to support moving forward. That's not about any of us losing our identity in that. The democratic process, your identity, right, happened at the front end of that process before the vote was taken. So that's something that can be worked on today, tomorrow. You know what I mean? There's no condition that needs to happen before that. Is there? Or is there something that, like, I heard maybe I don't think it was last time I was here, it was time before, a couple of you were like, oh, it's never gonna change. And so, I don't remember exactly who said that, honestly. But when I got in my car, I thought, well, if that's the case, then it may not change, right? But I don't think that's what you want. I know in interacting with you as individuals, I know that you each want the best for the students here. I know that. So like, what do we need to do to get there? Training? Yes, got that. But what else? Looking at the clock. Your money. We're not done yet.
Picking on me again, getting bullied.
I think one of the big issues that I think that goes beyond even our philosophical differences is our personality differences. I think that we just have different personalities, and because of that, you know, sometimes we have personalities that are exactly the opposite of each other. So I think some of our issues aren't necessarily professional, they're just more personal, right? Just because of things that have happened amongst the board and you know, a tit for tat or this or that. And I think that's one of our biggest issues that we've had. But you know, I feel like in the past few months it's gotten better. I think that our board, with moving forward, we're trying to find a new superintendent. We are, at least for now, coming together on the same page. Are we going to definitely need some help, some workshops and things like that? Sure, all boards do,
Yeah.
right? We all go to MASB stuff, or we try to get professional development. Anybody does that in the profession. And I know Mr. Piggott and I went to the board president workshop, and we learned a great deal about the role of the president. And so I think that that's definitely a thing that I would encourage us as a board to do. You know, and whether we do it together, or I would encourage us to actually go to the conferences, because that way we can, or when they have them in Detroit or whatever, because then we can go and talk to other boards and other districts and see what they do, different kinds of things. But I think that kind of opens our eyes, and maybe it'll open our eyes to the fact that there are a lot of boards out there that have different personalities, and they seem to be able to work through them. I mean, some don't, you know, but some are able to. And it also, when I look at it, I think me and Mr. Piggott realized, and what I've realized over the years is that, you know, we're not alone. A lot of boards struggle. You know, they have their differences, and I think we're big enough as a group where we can at least start to realize that we can work together. We can try to get our personalities. I mean, I wouldn't say that we're friends on this board, and maybe we don't need to be.
You don't need to.
Yeah, but I also think that it would help a little bit if we were a little bit more closer, right? I think that, because I felt like we were before, that we all at least had that, and there was that more mutual respect, right? We talked about our kids, and we'd go out and have a beer or whatever, you know, it'd be, and you know, and that would be great. But that isn't something that's existent right now, but that gets back to the back of the idea of personalities, and that we don't have that, you know, that connection that we had at one point, and I think we need that.
That's all.
I think, for me, ultimately, what's lacking within this board and around this table is just respect. You can have different personalities all you want, but if there's no respect, and you have to give respect to get respect, and I don't feel like we utilize respect appropriately as a whole to each other. I just think you can get beyond anything if you have respect for somebody, differences of opinions, but I think the respect is missing. That's what I mean, for me, I think that's what it boils down to. And that comes with trust.
Just saying trust.
That comes with trust, that comes with collaborative efforts, not necessarily agreeing, you don't have to agree to be collaborative. But you definitely have to be able to trust, and you have to be able to respect to move forward. And right now, I don't think that's, either of those things are something that we have. Although I will say, this whole process of, you know, the whole superintendent process has definitely been probably one of the most positive processes that we've had in a while, which is good.
public perspective? Commissioner perspective? Yes, please.
I was one of the people that said that I felt like we just weren't gonna work through this. And my comments really were born in deep frustration that, and it's been said several times here tonight at this board again, that it depends on whose side you're on. And we are all on the same team. Why somehow we've decided that there are sides in this, and I've seen it, and I've heard it over and over again. We vote, we each get one vote, and our voices are important individually, but we don't have sides. If we have a side, we're all on the same team. We all ought to be fighting hard for Waterford. So why we've decided that it's okay to have sides is all of the things that we've talked about tonight. And it's incredibly frustrating that's our mantra, and that when we read something, instead of self-reflecting and saying, here's the piece that I own of this, and here's where I can help get us better, instead we talk about how many people took the survey and whether they were teachers or whether, and I know you weren't splitting hairs. My point is that what we should do is say, this is us. This is all of us. We all own this. This is ours, and our community is speaking. And I grant you, the election was also another place where there was a voice. Absolutely, but I looked at the last free superintendent search and the comments that were there. Not one comment about the board, not one. So something has changed, and it's the 7 of us that make up this board. And if we can't self-reflect, and instead of trying to say, oh, it's not us, it's the other side, all of us, then we're not going to be able to move forward. And we all own this, and we have to take personal responsibility and accountability for our piece in this, and want to be better, and not take sides unless we're going to be on the side of Waterford. So that's my, I know I don't have to give you anything meaningful to move forward with, but
That's meaningful.
I hear it all the time. Well, it depends on whose side you're on. We're all on the same side. Unless I don't understand the vision, I've heard, we're going to implement our vision now. What is your vision? Because we have agenda items that come before us, and each agenda item, some of them are easy and some of them are hard, but we all have one vote. So.
Well, so here's the thing. I actually don't think this issue.
So then,
I don't think this issue. I mean, I'm not to contradict you, let me finish that with I think unfortunately, this is a part of you that the public has come to see. And what they're not seeing is the other parts of you that brought you to this work, for the district, for the kids, right? And it's not the individuals I'm talking about, it's the board in totality. I do think that when we think about, the training piece, the personality piece, this idea of what does respect look like, what does trust look like? Those are things, believe it or not, that can concretely be worked on. But they won't happen this by accident. They just won't. And so, obviously, we kind of talked about, after you make a decision about the superintendent, thinking about one of those first work sessions with the new superintendent, really unpacking, it's one thing to take roles and responsibilities, it's another thing to unpack those and say, okay, what does that specifically look like here in Waterford, right? I actually really love the example of oversight versus micromanagement, because it is subjective. It really depends on who you are and where you've been. So getting clear on specifically what it's going to look like here, so everybody has a shared understanding of it, and your new superintendent has a shared understanding of it, is a very useful thing. So if you both went to the board president's workshop, we've been tinkering with the training. So did you take the disc? Did you take the? You didn't take a disc assessment for it, because sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
no.
Okay, that's not a bad thing. So that's the other thing is that that's one of the assessments that we use just to help you get to know each other and how you deal with the world, and it's fun, right? It would be like Myers-Briggs or True Colors or one of those. And so I think that's a really simple, useful thing that we can do we can start doing that now. We don't have to wait for your new superintendent to start for that. I think that's a useful thing. So if you're willing to play ball on that, I can start that process right now. And I'm happy to throw it in, right? I'm not talking about upcharging, I'm talking about let's do this. Let's start to put our best feet forwards here. I guess the third part about this, which is we can't get to some of what you want till we clear up some of these other issues,
I know,
right?
I
Yours
agree.
is about a desired destination. There's some right processes.
What's has to happen
Yep.
before we get there.
And so, help me understand how you wanna tackle this. Do you wanna start working on, rules of engagement for the board before your new superintendent starts? How you're gonna interact with each other? And I'm not talking about the hard stuff, the roles and responsibility stuff, I'm talking about the soft stuff. The what does respect look like, what does trust look like? What are some things that we, the expectations you have of each other, stated or unstated? Do we wanna start that work before your new superintendent begins? Or do you think you can afford to wait? And I'm just asking the questions here.
I think there's no time like now, I mean, especially after seeing this, why would we wait? Why put it off? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of work we can do, and we do have a new superintendent, and we'll need to do that, but if we can start today, tonight, right this second, to try to improve, why wouldn't we? That's just, to me, a no-brainer.
What do you guys think?
I'm more of a hold off to the new superintendent. Part of the trust issue is some of us trust our current superintendent, some don't. That's where the disconnect comes is, I trust him, he's my friend. I don't trust him, he's no good. So we take sides, that's where the sides and the splits come from. It isn't my side, your side, right side, wrong side. Whether it be the superintendent or other staff. When you say, hey, I've known this person who's always been, good upstanding people, and they're questioned or integrity is, questioned, that hurts the board member as someone I've known for a long time, doing the correct things. So that is an issue. But again, I get over things very easily. But it's again, to start before we have a complete trust around our district. That's what, again, it's starting right now with wonderful. Again, I have no problem with that. But I think the overall would work better if we do it with the new superintendent, with his ideas. He may have ideas or feel things that he would like to do or instill.
He or she.
I'm sorry, you're right.
He or she.
I think I want a sewer jar for you, but every time you say he, you should put money in.
And I should, and I agree totally. Our next superintendent, that gives us something fresh to start with, something we can all buy into, and we all start fresh in it. Again, that's what I thought that Keith did when we had some issues before, but when we wanted him, I had looked at my previous 5 superintendents. Keith is the only one that was 7-0. So again, to me, again, we can start with anything. I'm on board, but it starts everything anew with. It's more of a spring thing. I can start working on the summer, but I'm gonna wait till spring because I like to put things off. So, just me.
Other perspective, different perspective, what do you guys think?
I guess I'd like to get a consensus first that we think that we can move forward and that there is validity to what is presented before us and that it's worthy of our time and effort to work on it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth our time and effort. I can see on both ends, we're starting earlier, waiting until the superintendent comes on. I like the idea. I do think, to answer Joan's question, I do think, at least I do, that there is something to be said about this information and that we should work towards an end goal of rectifying, our board. And I like the idea of when the superintendent comes on, working with that individual, because it kind of goes back to my question I talked about earlier. I think one of the things we have to be able to do is to collectively work as a board and a superintendent and be able to talk about, okay, what does trust look like? What does respect look like? What is micromanaging and what is oversight? And I think that though we could get an early start, and I understand what Mr. Pigott is saying, maybe, we can get that information on our own, and start to work towards some professional development on our end, but I think a lot of the core stuff would have to be worked on with this new superintendent that comes on, so that they're part of this process, because that relationship is gonna be key with the board. And, you know, ideally in a perfect world, it is that we disagree, we have a debate, a spirited debate sometimes, and we talk these things out, but we usually respect each other and we let it go, you know, when it's over, we're not picking sides. And then it's done and we move on to the next. I didn't get what I wanted on this, but we move on to the next thing and how can we make this better, or how can we make that better? But I think the superintendent is a big piece of that. So I side with Tricia on this and saying that I think that the run of it should be done once we have the superintendent in place. We work as a board, we try to have them bought into the whole process, so that we have these communications and understandings of what trust and respect look like.
I don't feel like we do move forward. I don't feel like we are content with our decisions and we move forward. I feel like we've had multiple instances that we bring things back to rediscuss and renegotiate, revote, and so I don't, is that what you were saying, that we do that, or that's what we need to aim towards? Oh, okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
I personally want to weigh in, I agree with the conversation that's been had before. I personally believe that we should start working on it right now, and my rationale is that it is not fair to bring a new superintendent on and have the expectation be that I would like to say, we own this, and it sends a strong message to ourselves, to our community, and to whoever is our new superintendent that said, we understand that we have an issue and we're gonna own it, we're gonna start working on it right now, even before we've identified you, recognizing that we are a team of 8, and that when that new person comes on, there's significantly more work that has to happen with them. But
Is it a team of 8?
a team of 8 when you include a superintendent.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying they are obviously an integral part of these dynamics in this relationship, but first and foremost, we own this, and I don't want to have an unfair burden for our new superintendent to have some expectation that he's going to fix it, he or she. He or she. But also that, to me, it's a show of this board that says, we own this, and we're gonna start working on it right now, regardless of who the new superintendent is, on those things that we can work on, so.
No, I appreciate that there is some dimension, you know, to the difference of what you start working on your own and what you can take as a new superintendent. So can I suggest that we start with that personality piece? Because it might be that that's a nice foundation, and then we see where we go from that. You know, if the timing is such, we might start to talk about just trust and those kinds of things among board members. Obviously, you'll have that conversation with the superintendent when you get there, but let's just start slowly and see how it goes. And that way we're not, you know, necessarily, yeah. I mean, I think that probably is a good place to start though, if you guys are amenable. I know the search takes a lot of time. So we'll think about finding a date to unpack the personality stuff after the search is done, if you're okay with that. Because we're not gonna try to jam in any additional meeting or whatever right now. And maybe we can just piggyback on one of your other meetings, and we'll just try to keep the time track. We know it is a huge check. So, is that good?
Thank you.
All right. So I want to thank you for this really, not fun conversation. It had to happen, because otherwise you probably would have wondered why we take, you know, those folks that took the time to show up and that took the time to fill out the survey. And so I appreciate the fact that you interviewed into it. I understand that was not a pleasant thing. Equally as important, you guys did good work today, right? I mean, think about it. So we're not quite on 3 hours yet, and right, so you're prepared, you have an excellent idea of what's going to happen when we get together, right, for first round interviews. You identified 8 candidates, 8 great candidates to interview.
That was a question. I mean, if we didn't miss one. I forgot to ask that earlier. Joe had mentioned, like, if there's somebody that you know of, because again, going through this was was quick over the weekend.
I think you have some
Whether we
great
missed.
options.
Okay,
I think you have some great options.
thank you.
I'll be interested to see how it all starts to shake out, right? It gets interesting after interviews. And you did a good job on interview questions. So what can you expect moving forward? I'm gonna finalize those interview questions. You don't need to sign off on them because I feel like, we're on the same page on that. I need about a day to get with these candidates, see that they accept the interview, get those scheduled. As soon as they're all locked in, you'll be the first to know. Then we'll make sure staff knows and then make it public. So that's kind of the order of operations. So just don't be surprised if it's 24 hours or so, 24 to 36 before you hear from me. Shouldn't be closer to 24 though. I need to get out and close the business tomorrow. And we'll make public those resumes with those folks that accept an interview. We'll just redact all the personal information on there. But it'll allow your stakeholders to start digging in and get a sense of, and then we'll start that vetting process as soon as those things come up.
You ready Google, right? See Google light up.
Oh, the Google.
Oh, the Google.
The 22nd and the 23rd then, right, starting at 6 p.m.
Starting at
So
6
2
p.m.
nights, okay.
Yeah.
At Kettering, at Waterford Kettering.
Al Kettering in the RGI.
Because were we originally?
LGI. I can't get it. I can't get
Large,
it.
large group instruction, yep.
Yeah, large groups.
And one last question is there a way that we're gonna be scoring them, or, I remember from last time, we did some kind of score process or something, and we ranked them?
Yeah, Marlene probably did that.
Yeah.
She had kind of a weighting system.
Yeah.
I tend not to do that. So you'll have the opportunity to record a score if you choose to for each question, and you can total that in your interview guide if you want to.
Oh.
I tend to not do that. So what I'm gonna look for is, after we're done with all of the interviews, we will debrief on each of the folks. So, we'll have a little conversation about each one, and we'll see who emerges. I'll do a soft poll to see, what are your top two? I'm gonna ask you for your top two. We may choose to go to 3. I'm gonna ask you for your top 2. I'll just do the register.
Well, sure.
Yeah, it'll be
What's
pretty.
to do that?
And now, I'll tell you, because you're gonna have 8, it might be rough, and so we might have to make adjustments along the way. This is not a canned process, and so, we'll change our facilitation accordingly. That doesn't, if we have to make adjustments to the facilitation, it's not a statement on your boardsmanship. It's exactly how I want this process to go. Remember, I don't want you to make a decision until you feel good about making a decision, right? That's how I view search. And so if we have to pull more people forward, we'll talk about what that looks like, okay? All right?
Perfect.
Good job.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you.
All right, you're gonna hammer close off.
Thank you to all of you that came tonight.
You didn't need motion.
Right.
Donna, can I just say something?
Sure.
I just want to commend the meeting tonight. Like, if every board meeting went like this, I would be honored to be there. Yes, I would. I would sit there, listen to me. I would sit there for 3 hours. Because we'll go use the restroom.
I don't like
the camera. Donna, this is my version of the way the light should be and the way it has been in the past. But this is my that has been my Facebook. There was nothing about your side, mine, any of that, because it was all about camera side. And so in the last year, there was a benefit of the Waterford kids or the Waterford staff. Or, do you know what I mean? So tonight, yeah, that cohesion tonight just brought it up, which is wonderful. So it was very nice to be here.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, did you?
Unless Bob then would be.
They'll do good, and they'll be gone in a year. Thank you. I mean, that's a good deal.
So have you talked to Megan? Should we go? Yeah, that's a good thing.
Thank you. Right, yeah.
Small business ambassador.
Of course, that's more important.
Well,
But I'm glad that I haven't heard from her.
it sounded pretty intense. So you actually